the San Rafael City Council meeting of Monday, October 7th, 2019. Ask you to join us at Pledge of Allegiance. Thanks, everyone. We did not meet in closed session, and therefore there's no report. And we'll move directly to the open time for public expression, which is an opportunity for you to address us on those items that are on your mind, but perhaps not on this evening's agenda. As you know, we won't be able to take action, but nevertheless we'll be interested in your thoughts. And I have several cards and then open it up from there. Gabriel Ferris. Gabriel? Good evening. Good.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriella Farias, and I'm the director at Lucas Valley Children's Center. I have been an employee of the City of San Rafael since February of 2016, so almost 14 years. I'm also San Rafael native, having been born and raised here. I don't currently live here and instead commute from Sonoma County. I'm also a union member for our child care division and part of the bargaining team for this current round of negotiations. Our negotiations have come to a standstill, and we want nothing more than the opportunity to get back to the table and finish the task at hand. Our division is faced with high turnover in staffing, with the exception of our director team, which has been for the most part stable. Despite this turnover, however, we have been able to maintain a high level of quality programming that the community values. All our programs are at capacity and earning well and have been doing so for several years. We are proud to be a part of the City of San Rafael and even more proud to help promote a good reputation for the city. This turnover, however, does come at a cost. Many of us are working longer hours to cover shifts and finish tasks that would otherwise be done if we did not now have to spend so much time training new staff. We are finding that more and more applicants live out of the area, so the cost of commuting is also a factor for potential employees. The benefits and compensations package that we are offering currently is not aiding in our staff retention efforts. I say all this to hopefully highlight the fact that we have an undervalued asset here. You have a division that is self-supporting and valued by the community. We are asking that you value it as well. We have historically been unequal when it comes to simple things like floating holidays. Every round of negotiations, we have been trying to chip away at the inequities faced by our division. We have more than earned what we have asking for. It is not more than others. What we are looking for is equality and fairness and the opportunity to attract and retain quality staff. In the end, while we will benefit with smoother operations, the kids in our programs will benefit from lasting and meaningful relationships with caregivers. The continuity and connection our division provides for the and that's my time.
Thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Trish Saylor.
Hello, Mayor and City Council.
Good evening.
I'm hoping you remember me. I'm Trish Cerruti Sailors, and I work for the Child Care Program for the City of San Rafael, and I'm the director at Vallecito Children's Center. I job share with Jeanette Bra, and I believe that her and I are the longest term employees the City of San Rafael has. She has worked for the city for 39 years, and I have worked for the city for 37. This is also my third time in as many negotiations that I've come to speak in front of you. Over all these years, our child care division has been blessed to serve thousands of children and families. Those relationships are very valuable. The children and their parents rely on us to provide safe and a nurturing environment. It has become increasingly hard, as you're aware of, to provide care for all the families who need it. We have been unable to hire and retain enough teachers. Of the ones we do hire, many are former children that we've had in our programs. The children love it as kids and want to give back. We realize that we are a stepping stone for most of them on their career path. Sadly, though, over the years, we have lost very valuable teachers who are amazing at their jobs, some to other city departments because the benefits and pay were better than in child care. In order for us to serve the families of the City of San Rafael, we need to hire qualified teachers, and to do that, we need the city to come back to the table and negotiate fairly. Thank you for your time.
And thanks for your comments. Michael Parsons. Good evening.
I'm here after waking up this morning and cleaning up the pee bucket or bottle from another homeless guy living on the street in front of me, after having a lady live there for a month and defecating and urinating in the street and defecating in the yard across the way. I am here before you motivated by frustration and anger at what I see going on within the city. I open up your latest and greatest newsletter snapshot, and what do I see? You're going ahead with the 120 units at Lincoln and 3rd Street with just 121 parking places. Yes, I know by law they could be less parking, but have you thought where all the extra vehicles are going to go? How are you going to have a vibrant downtown if nobody can get there or want to live there due to traffic and lack of parking? Have you looked at the congestion all your planned construction, along with SMART, will generate upon completion? It will be gridlock. Time to get out and walk and drive around and see what's really happening. Have your council meeting at 4:30 p.m. for a dose of reality. Take a walk with me and I'll show you the sights. Then there's the issue of the bike path on there, on which you have spent tens of thousands of dollars. They truly must be important. Bike paths must be far more important than having a truly functional police department that is not short-staffed and reactive rather than proactive in its patrol. I believe that if the citizens knew how little protection they had, they would be appalled. Let's not forget the Public Works and Parks departments and their lack of personnel to get the job done. What about spending some money on paving? The list is long. Homelessness, it goes on forever. But the bike coalition must be kept happy. The priority should be the majority, not the minority of the citizens. Thank you.
And thanks for your comments. Anybody else? Seeing no one, we'll close and come back and turn to the consent calendar, of which we have 4A through 4E. Covered in a single motion unless someone wishes to have an item held. Oh, did I skip Jim? I did. Jim, I'm sorry. Thank you for your...
Thanks, Mayor. I'm very flexible
thank
on
you.
whenever I go on the agenda. So I have just
That was a
three.
short report.
I have three brief kind of announcements and updates to provide. The first one is somewhat of a preview of the community is probably aware that there's a Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority that's being discussed throughout most of the cities and towns in Marin and fire districts. We have that on your next city council agenda, and it's going to probably take the majority of that meeting because it's a large topic. But I just kind of wanted to do a brief commercial for it here because it's something that's very important, something we're spending a lot of time on, and it's coming before you at the next meeting. So on September 24th of this year, the Board of Supervisors approved JPA, which then means it creates a vehicle for other cities and towns or fire districts to join the JPA. So that's what would be asked of you at your next meeting. There's 19 fire districts in Marin, so each of them are being asked to consider it. And the focus is wildfire detection and evacuation, vegetation management, fuel reduction, defensible space around homes, public education, those sorts of things. So there are a number of city councils and fire boards that have already reviewed it. It's going to several more this week, and it's really over the rest of this month that it's going to be hitting all of those jurisdictions. From what I can tell, and this is just my opinion, is that there's some disagreement on terms or issues of it, but what I'm hearing is general agreement of the need anyway, so I think that there's some consensus on agreement that wildfire prevention is something that's very important that we're not doing as fully as we could be, and certainly not regionally at this point. So that'll come back to you at your next city council meeting on October 21st. Also, as I think most people are aware, the council is very focused on looking at challenges to housing development and building housing. And we've had a series of meetings talking about housing challenges and how to overcome them, some of them within our controls, some of them not within our control. But we have now workshops. At the last time that this was discussed, a question came up of which council members would like to be on a subcommittee focused on removing challenges to housing, and everyone raised their hands. So instead of having a subcommittee, we're going to do some community workshops. And the first one is November 6th. So it's a little time from now, but just wanted to make sure that people are aware that it's upcoming. Probably focus on process and general policies at that point. They'll both be in the evening. And then the next one on November 14th focused more on financing, inclusionary housing requirements. Both of them 7 to 9 p.m. The November 6th would be at the Corporate Center, and the November 14th at the Council Chambers. So we still have lots of time to get the word out, but I just wanted to let you know that those had just gotten set up, I think, last week. So we'll be doing our best to make sure that everyone's aware of those who want to participate in this conversation. And then my last update is October 15th. So next week starts the, but continues public discussions around Costco and at Northgate Mall. And Costco is proposing to build a warehouse center, including a tire center and fueling station, to replace the Sears at Northgate Mall. I just wanted to take a minute to kind of explain what that is. So when they're going on to the Planning Commission next week, it's October 15th at 7 p.m. In this room. It won't be an action of does the city approve or not approve Costco. It's a pre-application hearing, and what that means is that Costco has not actually submitted a formal application to the council yet. Once they submit a formal application, that's when a whole bunch of work happens to figure out what kind of studies need to be done, environmental studies, level of traffic study, level of environmental review, all of those sorts of things. So that hasn't happened yet because we're still in this kind of pre-application, before an application has been submitted stage. So there's going to be lots of time. I know that there's been community surveys, there's been open houses, there's more kind of neighborhood association, homeowners association meetings that are taking place. But the Planning Commission will review the preliminary application, like I said, next Tuesday, October 15th at 7, and then the Design Review Board will on October 22nd at 7 p.m. So both of those happening this month. I think it's a great opportunity for those that want to learn more about what the proposal is. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to feel fulfilling for people that are looking for a final answer on whether this is going to happen or not, or in what incarnation it would happen. But it's an ongoing part of the process, and the pre-application, I think, is great when developers or someone who wants to build a project take us up on that, because it provides an opportunity for public input long before it's before you, ready for some sort of action. So those are a couple dates that were coming up, Tuesday, October 15th, and then the DRB on the 22nd. So thank you.
And thanks. I didn't mean to skip you, because that's important stuff. And I want to publicly, and will so more to a greater degree at the next meeting, thank you and our chief for the involvement you've had with regard to the JPA, or the county-wide effort. It's been significant as the chair of all city managers for the county. So thanks for your effort in that, and we'll talk further about that. And now we'll turn to the consent calendar. Items 4A through 4E. Anyone wish to hold an item? No. Anyone from the public wish to address us on any of these items before we act upon them with one motion? Coming back, motion with regard to 4E, A through E.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Second?
Moved and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. Thank you very much. We'll move on to other agenda items. 5A, new 120 residential unit mixed building on 203-223 3rd. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mayor Phillips. Good evening, council members. This project is before you for final action, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve Stafford, our senior planner, to walk you through the presentation.
Thank you, Rafi. Thank you, Mayor Phillips and council members.
Give that one moment to turn back on.
Let me take a moment to explain where this property, or this subject property, would be located. It's two downtown parcels, immediately southwest of the Smart Downtown Station and immediately west of the Bettini Transit Center. Approximately a little over half an acre. It's currently developed with a older single-story commercial building on the larger site, and then a newer two-story building on the smaller site. Quick description of the project. It is a new residential apartment building, 6 stories, 73 feet in height, 120 units total, and 121 garage parking spaces. In addition, it would have approximately 1,000 square foot commercial, ground floor commercial space as well. So in effect, it is a mixed-use project, though it is predominantly an apartment building. It's important to establish what the thresholds for the development standards for this site are. It's both located in the 2, 3, 2nd, and 3rd mixed-use east zoning district, which allows for a maximum 54 feet height. The general plan does permit a 12-foot height bonus upon meeting the affordable housing requirement for this project, essentially, so that would raise the maximum height to 66 feet. In addition to the total density, there's in the 2-3 MUE district, maximum density is 45 units. By meeting by meeting the affordable housing requirement in this case, which is 9 affordable housing units, BMR units, they're eligible for up to a 35% density bonus, which would be 16 additional density bonus market rate bonuses. This project asks for 3 concessions. One is an additional 7-foot density bonus. So this is in addition to the 12-foot density bonus permitted by the general plan. It's also asking for an additional 59-unit density bonus, which again is above the 16-unit density bonus that's permitted under the state density bonus law. In addition, this project is asking for a 5-foot front setback waiver, and that's along the 3rd Street frontage, by the way. Thought it would be important to establish a little background on the project's evolution. It came within the city about 2.5 years ago. At that time, it was a larger project, more units, more parking spaces proposed, a taller building, 7 stories instead of 6 stories, and it also established 2 concessions they were asking for, similar to tonight, a height bonus and also the density bonus. When it came in for conceptual review, which is what's similar what the conceptual review that was reviewed by both the Design Review Board, which is traditionally who reviews the conceptual review, but also the Planning Commission, which is fairly a new establishment with the city. On some of these larger projects that do have land use policy questions, we like to involve the Planning Commission early on so that they can weigh in, they can provide staff some guidance, they can provide the applicants some guidance, in addition to also provides an opportunity for the public to be heard early on in the process. So when it came in for conceptual review, it was still a larger project than what's in before you tonight. The parking had been reduced slightly, but at the same time, it was still proposing mechanical parking lifts. The height had been reduced to what was consistent for that site, 66 feet, 6 stories, but the concession was still asking for a density bonus. And again, that's a density bonus in addition to what the general plan allows as far as density bonus. I wanted to give you an opportunity to see what this prior design was. As you can see, there's an awful lot of, it's a very contemporary building, a lot of glass fronts on the ground floor. The upper floors are predominantly projections over the sidewalk right away. Another view, this would be from the street view that's very, very close to where the downtown SMART station is, looking at the project. The project's evolution continued during formal submittal. It's exactly where it is now in front of the commission, in front of the council. 120 units, 121 parking spaces. Most of those will be provided through mechanical parking lifts. Height's been increased to 73 feet, 6 stories, and the concessions still continue to be the density bonus, a height bonus, and then the front setback waiver. It's important, and I wanted to take a moment to explain a little bit about the increased height. Increased height was not based on additional density in any fashion. It was basically, they got down to being realistic about what their operational needs were for those mechanical lifts. They're not using a vault because of the low water table, so they have to have it at a certain height. So once they really established what mechanical lift system they were going to use, they needed some additional height. In addition, FEMA requires us to raise a little bit, so we had to raise the building had to be raised somewhat as well. So the actual additional height increase was based on a number of factors unrelated to necessarily trying to capture additional density in any fashion. February this year, the Planning Commission conducted a study session at the urging of staff. Staff wanted to get some preliminary feedback on some topical questions, some land use policy questions. They included both the density bonus, the height bonus, the front setback waiver request, but in addition to the mechanical parking lifts. This is a fairly new concept for us in San Rafael. The downtown parking and wayfinding study has been encouraging, and the council has adopted, or they've suggested that they're willing to support that as well, particularly in the downtown. But in addition to, we had some draft environmental findings that we wanted to pass by the Planning Commission as well, which is still, it's an exemption, a Class 32 infill exemption that we're proposing tonight. At that study session, the Planning Commission was generally in support of where the direction of the project was moving. But they did ask that the project explore a greater affordability, if they could. This is the revised project design. As you can see, a new architect was brought in. It clearly shows the configuration of base foundation, the base, you've got the middle, and then you've also got the upper floors. And so quite delineated quite easily. Lots of articulation. Also the upper floors have been stepped back. So, and quite a bit of landscaping as well. This is looking at the same site. I included this side just so you could see the extensive roof deck that was going to be for a shared or common amenity up on the roof deck. But this is also taken from the northwest corner. This is, you'd find that 3rd Street would be on the left, and on the right it would be Lincoln Avenue. So the applicant's requesting concessions that exceed the allowances that are allowed in the state density bonus, the maximum allowances under the state density bonus, which is only 35%. This project is asking for 166% density bonus. The municipal code says that that the council has the ability to provide these requested concessions far and above anything that's above the state density bonus if these standards will make the project financially feasible to construct. It requires the applicant to submit a financial pro forma and it to be evaluated. Once again, very much like the mechanical parking lifts, this is new to San Rafael, the financial pro forma. Staff needed some help. We hired a third-party economist, Seifel Consulting. Libby Seifel is here tonight, answer any questions you might have. And she went through and reviewed the financial pro forma. It took some time. It took some time to work through getting the information we needed from the applicant, not necessarily because they were withholding in any fashion. It was just because we needed more, and we kept asking for more, and they kept giving us more, and we kept evaluating more. And at the request of the Planning Commission, after the study session, a subcommittee was formed. It included a couple of council members here tonight. It included a couple of planning commissioners as well. And that gave those folks within the subcommittee an opportunity to review the conclusions of the financial pro forma, and then also ask questions of our economist as well. May of this year, the Design Review Board reviewed the formal project design, the design that you just saw up behind me. It included some enhanced gateway facade treatments that they had been proposing, essentially unique materials and colors along the gateway corner, which is identified as being Hetherington and 3rd Street. It's basically at the base of the V that's directly in front of this photo. So it has unique materials and colors. Another slide also from the northwest corner of the site, where you can see the enhanced materials and colors up on the upper left-hand corner. But clearly it shows, once again, the roof deck as well. In August, the Planning Commission reviewed this project as well. At the time, the project included greater affordability. Now it includes not only the 9 required BMR units, but also 3 additional moderate units as well, but for a fixed term of 10 years only. At that time, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the project as well, with the gateway enhancements, with the density and height bonuses, and with the setback waiver. The vote was 5-2. The reason provided for not recommending approval for the 2 no votes was the scale of the building was too tall, and the gateway enhancements just didn't work. They weren't up the highest quality for the gateway, what they had envisioned for the gateway. Comments received throughout this project were predominantly based on the prior design. As I mentioned, this project has gone through a new design, a new architect, and most of the comments that staff has received is from the prior design, the one that extends over, projects over the sidewalk right away. Public comments have been fairly balanced, Scale and traffic concerns from one side, and the need to provide housing, particularly in the downtown, on the other. After the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval, staff has received one public comment, and that's from Sustainable San Rafael. Sustainable San Rafael has always supported this project, although they continue to request greater affordability. The need is there. And they recommended that they've encouraged the city to explore the possibility of using our affordable housing in lieu fees to subsidize additional affordability, more BMRs. Sustainable San Rafael also recommended several design features to provide greater sustainability as well. This project provides high-density downtown housing near transit in close proximity to downtown transit and services. This project also presents an opportunity to be a catalyst for future downtown high-density and mixed-use projects. This project increases density as the increased density requested by this project is mitigated by smaller units. And what I mean by that is this project's asking for 73 feet in height. If you were to take this building and just limit it to the density that's allowed there, the 45 units, base density units, the 35% maximum state density bonus units, which is a total of 61 units, average size of unit would be over 1,300 square feet a unit. By providing 120 units, the average units are down to 678 square feet per unit, essentially affordable by design, much, much smaller, about half the size. The scale of this project is similar to the BioMarin campus building and also for the parking garages that are southwest of this site. Affordability, based on the Planning Commission's recommendations, the affordability has been increased by 4 moderate BMR for a limited 10-year term. The financial pro forma, done by, reviewed and concluded by Seifel Consulting, supports the requested concessions. Basically saying that without these density height bonuses and setback waivers, this project would be infeasible to build and would not happen. The mechanical parking lifts have been trending with the city. We've looked at these. This is the first project that's gotten this far that's actually proposing it, and it's before the final decision on that tonight. The site is a housing opportunity site in the general plan, and it's also envisioned with greater building height and density by the downtown station area plan. I'm here to answer any questions you might have, and as I've mentioned, Libby Seifel, the city's third-party economist, is here as well to explain anything you might have regarding that financial performance that she can provide.
Thanks for the complete and certainly interesting report. Having gone through the various gyrations, it seems to have improved. Comments before we turn it to the public? Anyone? 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 No? In which case, anyone from the public wish to address us on this particular item? Now would be the time to do so. Bill.
Good evening. I'm Bill Carney with Sustainable San Rafael. We do indeed think this is the right kind of housing and the right kind of place, that is across the street literally from transit. And we certainly welcome Seagate's addition of 3 affordable units for moderate income families, in addition to the 9 units for low and very low income households. Still, that's only 10% of the total units in this development. For doubling the density, which is what's being requested, we ask that you find a way to double the number of affordable units to 20%. That is an additional 12 units. To do that, while respecting the developer's pro forma and preserving the feasibility of the project, we suggest that the city retain the option to close the gap between affordable and market rate rents for those 12 additional units, using funds from the city's in lieu commercial workforce housing fees or other sources that may become available. Likewise for the 3 moderate income units after those initial 10 years. So we ask that you condition your approval of the project on the developer's agreement to allow the city to secure the affordability of these units in this manner at a future date. Just preserve the possibility at this point. The developer gets a feasible development, and the city keeps the ability to create much-needed affordable housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill, and thanks for your suggestion. Anyone else? Come on, come on. Amy, step up. Thank you.
Amy Lyke, Crystal Park, speaking for myself. I applaud Bill Carney's suggestion. He seems to know what he's talking about as far as how the city could help out in that. I personally believe that it's too tall. It needs a setback. Just because Biomarin is tall on the other side doesn't mean that this should be that tall. And I also believe that fiscal feasibility is, as you know, a relative term for a developer. I think it's setting the stage for buildings that are too tall in a town that would be dwarfed by them in our downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else? Josh, good evening.
Josh Townsend, representing the Santa Fe Chamber. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Chamber and its nearly 625 employers, businesses with over 2,600 employees, we want to support this project wholeheartedly. We understand the fact that in order to support our downtown businesses, we need density to help support those businesses. We feel that this project absolutely does that and can bring more vitality to the downtown region. The local developer is very civic-minded, and he understands the unique challenges that this brings to the area, and I think he's really done an incredible job of really working with the city and within the city to come up with something that will really help embody what the city needs and really create a more advantageous tax base for the city. Thank you very much.
And thanks for your comments. Anybody else? Then we'll close. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand. Come on, please come up.
Jenny Kerrigan, thanks for the opportunity. The concessions that you're giving, I just think that perhaps in alignment with what the other gentleman was saying, why do you have to have parking at all? If the whole premise is that downtown's going to be walking and everyone's shopping and everyone's getting on the train or getting on the ferry, the need for 120 parking spaces, if we got rid of those, then we could make more housing, the density changes, the height could change, everybody could get what they want, and the proportion of 10% to 20% would be easier for you to absorb because you don't have the parking. I don't know. It just seems like we don't need more parking spaces. We need more people that want to be in downtown San Rafael and commute and stay here and shop and do everything. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Good evening, Casey Mazzoni with the San Rafael Chamber. I sit on the board and I'm also the chair of the Governmental Affairs Committee. As you know, one of the priorities of the San Rafael Chamber is to support new housing units for our employers, to keep the employees here living and shopping in our community. This development is a model of that example. They have added units above what was entitled creating additional homes, including 12 below market rate homes. This not only meets the required code by right, but exceeds the required number of BMR units, providing an additional benefit to the community. We hear a lot of discussion about the 20% inclusionary requirements, and even though the Chamber supports the creation of affordable units, we simply aren't seeing units being built. The developers have calculated the construction costs, labor costs, and the current remarket rents to make this project feasible. We hear that requiring more BMR units may kill this project. Our concern is if this project does not get built, approved as proposed, it'll be a lost opportunity. The San Rafael Chamber Board of Directors urges you to support this project. Thank you.
And thank you. Anybody else? Going once. We'll bring it back. Bill Carney raised an interesting point with regard to using some of our housing funds in essence, subsidize. Have you thought about that? Is that something you would advise, or have you already discounted it?
I'm going to chime in here over
Oh, you
in
are?
the bleachers section.
Oh, I didn't see you over
I
there.
just want to, first of all, it's a little premature to commit any of our affordable housing in lieu fee funds to any one project. We have had several requests from other project proponents to tap into that fund, and if you may recall, when we gave a report on the housing challenges, this is one of the takeaway items that we were going to be doing some follow-up on and will be brought up at the workshop. So it is premature. Reserving the opportunity to do that in a condition may be a possibility, but certainly a commitment for us to make that contribution to this project is not advisable.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions of staff or comments? Andrew?
If I could.
Sure, of course.
I was also curious, and you've answered part of the question I had, but leaving aside that it may be premature, I'm curious whether the issue has been floated with Seagate and whether there's a response to that. In other words, is there a receptivity that goes to the point of actually calculating what the buyout cost would be for those units that would be added to the BMR count, so that we could come up with a figure if we had the wherewithal to do it?
Good question. Will, you wish to comment?
Good evening. I'm Wick Polite with Seagate Properties. I'm sorry, I thought I was going to have an opportunity to address the council and mayor. We have basically the data that we need. I think the issue here is twofold. One is where the market is today vis-a-vis rents as well as construction costs will be substantially different than it is, say, 3 to 4 years from now when this project is actually complete and ready to be occupied. So I think we can probably calculate that number. However, I don't think we can do it today, given the future of this project. So I have a couple other items I'd like to propose if I can, or am I too late?
We will be interested, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. For those of you that don't know us, Seagate Properties has been investing in San Rafael and Marin County since 1987. We've invested over $300 million worth of equity in a variety of projects, some of which you'd probably recognize, the San Rafael Corporate Center being one. We were responsible for moving Marin here in the first place. We have owned Montecito Shopping Center for some 30-plus years. We were directly involved in the development of the Marin Health and Wellness campus as well. As Steve pointed out, this project, we've been working with the city and the community for probably 2.5 years plus. And I think Steve did a great job of giving you an update and a summary of where we've come from. Some of you may ask, why this project? Why now? Why this location? We feel very strongly that this location is probably the most logical for a high-density development of its nature in San Rafael for a variety of reasons. Number one, it's walking distance to downtown 4th Street and all the various restaurants and amenities that the city has to offer. To have more people closer to downtown enhances the stated goal of Alive After 5. It's a very simple equation. The more people you have down here, the more activity there'll be. We think the proximity to SMART and soon offering direct access to the ferry and the city and all points north is a real strong advocate for a mixed-use, high-density development of this nature. Wherever the Bettini Transit Center lands will be fairly close to that, we assume. Same kind of thing. No need for a car, walking distance. For those that do need to use a car, we provide direct access to 101 and 580, thereby minimizing the congestion on the surface streets, as well as direct access to the north-south bike route. So we think there's a lot going for this particular site that makes it the most logical location for a development of this size and density. We also feel that this project is very timely in our design. We've worked awful hard to meet what we perceive to be the needs of both existing residents as well as those that may be downsizing from a larger house and or wanting to move to San Rafael from, say, the city where it's much less affordable. As Steve referenced, the number of units provides smaller units that are much more affordable by their nature on a gross rent basis. We've developed what we feel is a very attractive and substantial amenity package in the form of the roof deck, as well as an internal atrium area that'll be more of a quiet, kind of reflective location. We think that providing the maximum alternatives as far as transportation between bicycle, walking, bus, transit is unquestionably a real plus for everyone. We feel that there is a movement towards people who would be locating here who would want to own a car, perhaps to use on weekend for weekend trips or day trips, yet not use it on a daily basis. The design of this, having puzzle lifts and having 120 units of parking, gives us the ability, or gives the tenants potentially the ability to own a car, park it on Sunday night, and never get into it again until Saturday when they have to go do something that doesn't have service from public transportation. We're incorporating ride sharing into this project. We've incorporated staging areas for Lyft and Uber to avoid congestion on the street of people waiting to get into cars, etc. We've incorporated what we plan to have as a bike concierge or a bike valet service, offering storage and service both to the residents as well as to the public. So if someone comes from the north, works at Bayou Marin, drops a bike off, they can have their bicycle serviced and in storage and know it'll be there when they get back. We've also provided for EV charging stations directly at ground level, as well as virtually unlimited EV additional charging stations to be wired into these puzzle lifts. So that's something that can be expanded substantially in the future. In addition, we're not coupling the parking space with a particular unit. So if I have a unit and I don't own a car and I don't need a parking space, it can certainly free one up for either other residents, or if we find we have substantial excess capacity, we can offer that to the public as well. The retail frontage on Tamalpais in the corner is something that we think really would help liven up the activity. Two other things we've incorporated into this is a setback for both handicap ramps as well as access to both the apartment and the retail amenity and the bicycle valet on about 70% of the project, which, although it's not a formal 5-foot setback, it does provide, I think, a 6 to 7 foot setback from the street. Overall, we're excited about this project. We think it could be a real spark to set off more and more development in the downtown station area plan, and I think it's something that we've tried hard to address a lot of the public comment, both from all the various community groups as well as individuals and private parties. We have a lot to work on between now and completion if you elect to approve this project, but our goal would be to have this available for occupancy probably 3 to 4 years from now, barring any unforeseen circumstances. I'm perfectly willing to answer any more questions. Rick Williams, our architect, is here, who could answer some of the design questions you may have as well.
Well, thanks for the summary, which I think is pretty exciting. A lot of people may not be aware of all the elements that you've just outlined for us, and it's very cool, and I think we'll summarize here in a moment, but my reaction to your comments, a real positive benefit to particularly our downtown, so I'm looking forward to that possibility. I am a little bit concerned, though, and maybe you can alleviate that with regard to the parking, because, of course, we're going to hear, oh, geez, 120 units, everybody has 2 cars, and therefore there's going to be another 100 cars on the street. How do you address such an issue as that, or comment as that? Not an issue per se.
I think there's 2 sides to that argument that I've seen. One is if you don't provide the parking, people won't drive. Great theory. Reality is it doesn't always work that way. Second is that the parking that we have is designed into the first level, which is a 22-foot level deck. And that free 22-foot level clear height gives us the ability to operate the parking lifts. The parking lifts, while affixed to the building, are not permanent. So if we find 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, or 15 years from now, people aren't driving cars, these things can come out and there can be another level of apartments added in this project. Granted, it's a whole different bag of worms, I guess I would say, as to density, number of units, et cetera, but it's a very viable alternative in the future if we find that people just aren't driving cars in the future.
What if you find that everyone has 2 cars? Then what?
Well, then maybe we'll look around for some additional land to build another parking structure.
Maybe. Interesting. Comments, questions? Yeah, please. Maribeth.
A comment and then a question. I guess it's more of a compliment. The efficiency and effectiveness of your outreach is demonstrated by the lack of opposition at the meeting tonight. So you've actually been very successful, and I want to compliment you on your hard work to get to this point, where the loudest commenters are in favor and asking for us to approve this.
Thank you.
Which brings me to my question. There have been several projects in the city of San Rafael that we have been very enthusiastic about and delighted to approve and look forward to having them built, and years have gone by and they haven't been built. What are your specific plans, and can you commit to explaining to us how you're going to get this built? Specifically, do you intend for your company to actually undertake the construction of this building, or is it your plan to sell the rights once you obtain them?
Yeah, I mentioned we have quite a bit of work between now and then. One of those components is we have to figure out how to pay for it, obviously. There's really 2 or 3 different alternatives that we can pursue. One is that we can take in a major institutional partner who would bring 100% of the money to the table to build the project. A second is to bring a combination of our equity individually as well as construction money, construction debt to the project. And then the third would be, I'll call a hybrid of that, which is we would stay involved in the project and then bring in an institutional partner and essentially sell part of the project to them. The latter is our goal. We typically have done this in several other situations. We have a long-standing track record with major institutional investors in the form of J.P. Morgan, California Public Employees, Northwestern Mutual, et cetera, et cetera. So our goal is to try to bring a capital partner in and get this project going with us remaining as the what I'll loosely call the operating partner. We're responsible for executing the plan. As far as the construction itself, we would retain a general contractor, and that general contractor would certainly have to have a depth of experience in this type of project. So.
And what's your level of confidence that you can find the institutional partner that you need to enact these entitlements?
I think there is an institutional partner out there. I'll be very honest that this is a very, what I'll call a thin development project. That being said, there are many institutional investors who take a long-term goal, a long-term view of this investment, which would be 10 years plus. And I think that's key because the metrics in our business of a go versus a no-go decision are based on the current yield that you can achieve when this project's complete, which is the very thin end of the project. The second is what's the value once it's stabilized and operating. That gets a little better. The longer you stay involved in the project, the greater the economic yield. I will say that in our case, it's not uncommon to see projects resell older projects in the 800, 900,000 per unit area. Our current cost on this thing is probably somewhere in the 500 to 550 plus or minus. So there's a what we call a development spread in the project. So given given that development spread on a long-term basis, I think we'll find a partner. I think the other component of this is that, if you hadn't noticed, it's rather tough to get entitlements in Marin. So that's somewhat a double-edged sword. Any institution that recognizes the fact that it's very tough to get something built will recognize the fact that it's a high barriers to entry market on a going forward basis. In other words, there's not going to be 700 more apartments built tomorrow to compete with. And I think that component will attract quite a few institutional investors once they spend the time to understand the market and see just how hard it is to try and get something of this size and value and location approved.
Thank you.
Andrew, I think you had something.
My question was just asked. Thank you.
Okay.
John?
Question, comment, and I think it's for staff. So this location is within the priority development area, correct?
Correct.
Right, so it's really, again, complementing that the PDA, as it was designated, was to encourage exactly this type of infill and to have a higher density, and we approved that PDA years ago. So to me, and I know you have a question, but I think it's exciting to have something that's within what we had projected years ago for this area.
Thank you.
John?
Yes, so on a typical project like this, following what Councilmember Bush asked, at what point would you not pursue, or you know, when you have your timeline, what do you expect the time to obtain that institutional financing? If you're looking at this 2 years from now and you still don't have the investor, you've got these entitlements on this property. Is this, you know, I think all of our points are we've approved a lot of units and not nothing, but most have not been built yet. At what point does this project no longer become feasible for you from a time perspective, or just cost of carry and all the other pieces you have going on?
I don't know that there's a specific time frame I could put on that. As far as cost of carry, right now the project's self-sufficient, i.e. the rents are covering the expenses, so it's a net zero out of our pocket. As far as the rental market in Marin, as well as in the entire Bay Area and certainly California, rents continue to increase due to the lack of housing. I don't see a solution to that overnight, and as long as those rents continue to increase, we think that this will remain a viable project. On the flip side, construction costs are moving in excess of what rents will justify. We believe that that's going to slow down for a variety of reasons. I think you've seen 3 or 4 major projects go up around here between Apple Spaceship, the Salesforce Tower, Chase Center in the city, recovering from some of the fires to the north. What that's done is created an incredible shortage of labor. So in answer to that, a lot of the sub-trades have been just simply raising their prices and taking the highest profit jobs. A lot of that pressure has come off. You're starting to see the tech economy slow down slightly. You're starting to see You're starting to see people and companies move out of the Bay Area. So a combination of those factors, we think, will continue to make this a viable project. As far as our search for a capital partner, that's something that we'll be doing in tandem while we work through the construction drawings and some of the other various aspects that need to happen vis-a-vis the final city building permit, as well as our internal needs. So that's something that we'll be moving forward certainly as soon as we can. But I would say we would probably have a financial partner in place within the next year to year and a half. If we don't have it in 2 years, or at the point in time when the entitlements would essentially possibly lapse, then we'd have to reassess the entire process.
And so from the timing of obtaining the institutional partner and breaking ground, that the construction time of the projects, I know that's out starting 18 months to 2 years from now. and you mentioned a 3 to 4 year before occupancy, so you're talking maybe a 12-month construction, 12 to 18-month construction time?
I think we'll probably get 12 to 18 months worth of construction, and I would guess probably another 12 months plus or minus between construction drawings, finalizing permits, actually taking bids, selecting a contractor, and being ready to start moving dirt and demolishing existing buildings. So my 3 to 4 timeline is a combination of the pre-construction necessary work as well as the construction work itself. And as I said, in tandem with that, we'd identify our capital partner.
Is that,
Okay.
we done with
Oh.
questions, just comments, or?
You're done?
I just had
Go
one,
ahead.
one final
No,
comment.
go ahead.
Okay.
Go.
We've received, positives and some negatives on this, but mostly positives. But over the past couple of years, when we've had projects come to us, I think of the assisted living facility on Mission that came to us, and talk was about why we didn't, push more on that and having more housing and affordable housing, and the developer had come back to us and said, well, the way that it's zoned, it doesn't make sense. It didn't pencil out because they were capped at, I think, two stories there in that position. And some of the comments we heard was, well, what can we do about that? How can we make that a little bit more feasible, especially in our downtown area? And we responded back, well, maybe we need to look at that zoning and increase the size, because going up doesn't exponentially increase the cost, and it provides it for a more sustainable project. So I'm completely in favor of this project in this area with the height bonus and going up that, because that's the only way we're going to get these projects to be built in this area, because 2 stories or 3 stories or even 4 stories with Goss is not going to work. So my comment is I think if there's a place to do it, this is the place to do it, and I'm fully supportive of it.
Thanks for your comments, and I guess I would endorse that last point as well. It does, as I see the downtown developing, it feels to me like, and I can visualize your project in that context, and it feels most appropriate for all the reasons you've cited. I'm pretty excited about it. I just listed a few points that I'll just touch on in no particular order. I think that the more recent design is preferable. I like it better. And so I'm glad that you've made that change. Sometimes it's difficult, I know, but you've done that. Mechanical parking I've seen in Berkeley. I think it's very effective. It's the way to go when you're trying to preserve space, and it's limited, certainly in this case. So I like that idea. I like the fact that it's near SMART for the reasons you've mentioned, but I'm a little bit involved in SMART, and I do think there's some synergy between the two. It's not contingent upon, some people might think so, but for the success of SMART, but I do think there is a compatibility there. I'm okay with the additional height for the reasons John mentioned. It does seem to fit in that particular area, and it's not excessive, I would suggest. Better design I mentioned. It's near BioMarin. To me, that makes eminent sense for those that wish to work in BioMarin. Certainly an important employer of the city of San Rafael. And isn't there a nice compatibility there that perhaps some of them will enjoy your site? I suspect they will. Image of the downtown I mentioned. I'm curious, though, on the PDA, the point that Kate brought up, because she's right. We decided we had 2 PDAs, one in North San Rafael by the Civic Center. Decided to eliminate that, but we've kept this one. So I do see it as a development site for that reason alone. But help me with the funding, because I do seem to recall there was some funding in connection with traffic mitigation associated with PDAs. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but are you aware of that? In other words, why have we kept a PDA, and what are the advantages that might attribute to this particular development?
The PDA designation allows for subsequent funding through state grants and infrastructure grants, and that's why the designation is still in place. So we are working through the Downtown Precise Plan, which you had a conversation about earlier, and the concept with that is once there is a plan in place, that will make obtaining state funds for infrastructure improvements, capacity improvements, other public amenities easier if you have that sort of planning in place. It's not directly related to private development, specific private development, but more for the structure and getting things going in the area.
Well, I guess I was thinking of Bill Carney's point earlier, rather than using our housing fund, is there, and I don't know much about PDAs, I'll admit that, but is there a possibility that we could tap into PDAs and accomplish several things at once? I mean, we have the PDA, we've kept it in place for presumably for a reason. Maybe this is it.
The type of funding that would be available is usually not directly related to the affordability of units. The only way to obtain some sort of affordability of units is if there was a partnership between the developer and a nonprofit, where the nonprofit came in, had obtained tax credits, but that's kind of a different sort of development proposal than what you have before you this evening.
I know it complicates matters, but, you know, why not at least consider it? And I see Joe back there smiling, so, you know, anything's possible, right? So I would encourage us to at least consider
More
it.
comments to this, if
Yeah,
I could?
please.
Yeah, one thing, with regard to financing, particularly transportation financing, yes, the PDA does have an opportunity that's not afforded to areas outside the PDA throughout the county. The regional transportation plan, which is authored and approved by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, gives an extra amount of funding for transportation improvements to PDAs. So there is a benefit there. Again, like Rafi says, it doesn't link back to affordable housing, but it does give us a one-up on getting transportation funding in our downtown area.
Well,
one other thing I would like to mention is that there are other housing bills, and we mentioned housing bills when we presented to you the Housing Challenges Report, that have been signed by the governor that do afford some opportunities in the future for tax increment financing to work with the developers on securing some of the units for affordable, but we're not quite there yet.
Well, we're talking about 2 or 3 years, or maybe 4 years. So I'd like to keep that possibility open, the PDA possibility, because like I said, we went through an exercise and decided against it in north part of the town, but kept it purposely here. And I was thinking in terms of something, quite frankly, similar to the development. Now, I don't know ins and outs, but if there's something we can do to enhance either your project or perhaps others that are similar in some ways, I'd be in favor of that. So I think it'd be remiss not to at least consider it. Having said that, any other comments, questions? Is there a motion with regard
Well,
to this?
just very briefly, I
please.
want to, for the reasons that my colleagues have given, I want to concur and indicate my approval of the project as well. And I want to thank you for the confidence you've shown in our downtown by investing in it over the last 2 to 3 years, and in particular investing in this entitlement process, which can be arduous, as we all know, but hopefully it'll prove out to be a beneficial one, both for us and for you. So thank you for that commitment.
Thank you very much. Is that the prelude to a motion?
I move that we.
Thank you. I'm sorry for going out of order.
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Moved and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collins.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. Clock starting. Let's make it 3 instead of 4. Moving on to the next item, which is new library facilities planning study.
Mayor, as staff is regrouping up here and some people are leaving the chambers, I would like to give a few background comments, do a little bit of an
Sure.
intro as we're clearing out here.
Why don't we wait 1 second?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to kick off this particular presentation, and I just want to make the point that I think that what just took place in the council chambers was really important, and housing, and the council's been focused on that for a long time. But I want to submit that this is equally as important topic as we talk about the future of our downtown and our libraries throughout the whole city. And there are, when you look at the staff report, there are a number of links that are in the staff report that go off to hundreds of pages of background documents. And I wanted to just suggest why that is, and why so much background work on this particular topic. And I think it's because that our libraries are precious in San Rafael. We've got 3 locations right now, 3 different parts of our city. They're beloved institutions in the city, and the fact that everyone knows that they're welcome in the library, they know it's available to them for lifelong learning, and they're a key component of what we do as a city. The needs of the space changes over time. We've had library, particularly the Carnegie, in place for a really long time. And I know if we were to design something today for today's needs, it might look a little different from what we would have designed in the past. I think that there's probably more community gathering type of space and educational and those sorts of spaces that we'd want to make sure we had room for. But I did want to just clarify what the approval is that we're asking for tonight, and that is that we're not asking for any approval tonight. What we're doing is that there's a lot of information that I referred to. There's the whole null and tam analysis. There's a survey that you're going to hear about. There's existing building conditions of the existing library. There's so much information that's out there. What we didn't want to do is just hand that over to you and say, okay, what do you think? We wanted to take a stab at some initial recommendations, at least from staff's perspective, as what might you do with all this information? And there's lots of different ways that you could go. There's lots of different ways that you could go at each location. You could do different sorts of things in Terra Linda, in the canal area, downtown. So we thought we'd try to facilitate the conversation a little bit by saying, here's one direction that you could go that would make sense to us. But what we're really looking for tonight is feedback from the community and feedback from the council in terms of, is this the direction that you'd like us to proceed on? Because there are so many different ways that you could go with this. It would be helpful to narrow it down a little bit and give us some direction as to what you would like to see going forward. So we've got some suggestions about that, but we want to test those with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan and Henry in Library and Recreation. And I know they're going to also have Nolan Tam, the architects, do some background work. But I just wanted to give you kind of a foreshadowing of what we're going to be asking down the road.
And thanks for doing so. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Henry Bankhead, Assistant Library and Recreation Director of the new Library and Recreation Department. I'm going to start with a little background. The original downtown library opened at its current location on January 9th, 1909. As early as 1915, library trustees reported that the library has outgrown its book space and further accommodation is required. In the late 1950s, local architect Gordon A. Phillips was hired to design a 6,000 square foot addition that would more than double the library size. The expanded library was dedicated on February 28, 1960. San Rafael quickly outgrew the first library expansion, and the next step was to enclose the parking garage under the 1960s addition. When the new space opened in 1976, Library Director Vivian R. Smith called it a short-term solution to a long-growing need for more library space. The Pickleweed Library branch opened as part of the Albert J. Bohr Community Center in July 2006, providing an additional 2,000 square feet of library space to serve the Canal neighborhood. There have been 3 recent studies regarding library needs in San Rafael. The Service and Facilities Vision Report by Group 4 Architects in 2017, the Existing Facilities Report by Nolan Tam Architects in 2019, and the Facilities Planning Study also by Nolan Tam Architects and also finished in 2019. The Service and Facilities Vision Report was conducted by Group 4 Architects in 2017. This report collected information and community input about existing library services and facilities, gathered community projections and priorities, and completed an analysis of space needs and site requirements to plan for the future. The report also included a community survey funded and commissioned by the San Rafael Public Library Foundation. The Facilities Vision Report found that the downtown library facility had substantial weaknesses in the areas of safety and access, building systems, architectural issues, and functionality. The primary challenge identified for the Pickleweed Library facility was its insufficient size. At the time of the facility's vision report, the San Rafael Libraries provided 14,500 square feet of library service space. According to library industry standards presented in the report and based on San Rafael's population today, the city should have 40,000 to 45,000 square feet of library service space. Looking 20 years into the future, Group 4 recommended 45,000 to 50,000 square feet, assuming an 8% population growth rate for the city. This graph shows the amount of library space in square feet per person for a selection of California cities of comparable size to San Rafael. San Rafael has about 1/3 of a square foot per capita versus 1 square foot or more for cities of similar size. In terms of location of additional library space, the survey revealed citywide demand for an expanded downtown library, value in the idea of a Terra Linda branch, and strong local support for the Pickleweed Branch Library. The existing facilities report, completed by Nolan Tam in 2019, evaluated the current state of the downtown Carnegie Library and provided a cost estimate of addressing the identified weaknesses in the building. This existing facilities report identified the scope of work necessary for the downtown Carnegie Library to remain operational and code compliant for at least 5 years and provided a cost estimate for addressing the identified weaknesses in the areas of safety, access, building systems, architectural issues, and functionality. The report identified 5 primary areas of concern that would need to be addressed. These included waterproofing the building, electrical life and safety updates, plumbing and ADA compliance, carpentry code upgrades, and additional remedial construction. The report estimates that if all construction was done in a single phase, the total cost would be approximately $1.77 million. If, however, the construction is completed in phases, the cost would rise to approximately $2.39 million. And now I'll turn it over to Susan Andrade-Wax, Library and Recreation Director.
The facilities planning study by Nolan Tam began in 2018 and concluded this last May in 2019. The purpose of the facilities planning study was to conduct a top view, more like a bird's eye view, of what the footprint of a building, the grounds, the parking, as well as the land acquisition, capital, and costs associated with an expansion plan for the Pickleweed Library branch, 3 locations for a branch in Terra Linda, and 3 location sites for a downtown library. After initial meetings between city staff and Nolan Tam, an expanded new library subcommittee was formed to guide the process. The subcommittee included 2 city council members, city staff, and representatives from both the library board and the Library Foundation. The subcommittee met to review the preliminary findings and to continue to meet throughout the process. Between June 2018 and May 2019, the city hosted 9 community meetings to solicit public feedback on the location options as well as the building plans. Based on feedback, Nolan Tam developed building plans and cost estimates for an expansion of the Pickleweed Library branch, 3 locations for Terra Linda, and 3 locations for the downtown library. In late spring, the subcommittee recommended that a survey be conducted to help the community's feedback on guiding the 3 downtown locations. As a result, the San Rafael Library Foundation funded and commissioned the OSR group to conduct the survey. Representatives from both Nolan Tam Associates and the OSR group are here tonight to provide a brief overview of those options and feedback that was received. It is my pleasure to introduce to you from Nolan Tam Architects, Chris Knoll, Principal, Allison Yaris, Associate Principal, and Trina Goodwin, Associate Principal.
Thank you, and good evening, members of the council.
Welcome.
I'd like to sort of go through some of the conclusions, sort of the studies that we did. As Susan and Henry said, you know, we did a lot of studying about what the possibilities might be, and what we'll do is sort of show you how we've refined those options and give you some a little bit of explanation about, you know, what they are, and happy to answer any further questions about them. It's based upon sort of the original Group 4 study that identified the need in San Rafael of somewhere between 40 and 50,000 square feet, but then looking at about 45,000 square feet as a target for the citywide facilities of libraries. And that, you know, is split between the downtown, the Pickleweed and Canal neighborhood, and Terra Linda. Since we started this study, a 3,000 square foot branch has shown up in Terra Linda. So miracle of miracles, there is now library service in Terra Linda that we have now factored into sort of the projected sizes of the three branches of maybe 11,000 square feet eventually in Terra Linda, but maybe 20 to 27,000 in downtown, and then about 7,000 in the Canal neighborhood. This is the first one, is in the Canal neighborhood. What we wanted to do here was to find an expansion of the existing facility, which is just about 2,000 square feet. It's really quite small. And wanted to get the largest expansion that we could have that doesn't sort of impede some of the rest of the site, in particular a playground on that site. We want to keep the entrance in the same location just for sort of simplicity, to expand and improve the parking, because parking is already inadequate, and the expanded library would increase the demand for parking. And what we came up with was something about 7,000 square feet with an estimated construction cost of about $7.4 million. This is how it would lay out. The existing library is that little space right there, and the expansion would expand over here to the west of the existing community center. Inside, you would have the existing entrance. You'd have sort of a staff area, a large area for adults and teens and children. So it would all lay out pretty rationally in that area, and that would be kind of how we could expand that library to sort of great effect. On the site, we would look at expanding the parking lot at either end to add another a number of spaces that would sort of make up for the library expansion and also relieve the general parking demand that now currently exists in the Pickleweed area. The second area was Terra Linda. Terra Linda is a very complicated area. It's sort of spread out, and there are a lot of different opportunities for where sites might happen there. The main ones that we looked at were at the Northgate Mall and at the Terra Linda Community Center, but we did look at several others around the site and study those. What has happened since then, as I said, was the mall operators offered a space to the library, and the library, you know, quickly, you know, took them up on the opportunity and has built a really great little branch there in an old shoe store, and even the shelving is really conducive for shoes, for books as well. So everybody's very happy about the serendipity of this. It still is only about 3,000 square feet. We were projecting, you know, somewhere of a need of maybe more on the area of about 11,000 square feet for the Terra Linda community. So in the future, what might be expedient would be to continue negotiations with the mall operators and possibly look for a larger space. And that is an example, you know, of a space that would be a much larger space that might improve the library service. But by all reports, it's doing very well. It's a nice idea. It's been very well received. And I think sort of building upon the success of this venture would be something that could be readily done in the for the Terra Linda neighborhood. Keep it at the Northgate Mall. So we did do studies on the other sites, but this one seems to be the winner. And then the downtown is also quite a complicated experiment, because there are very few building site opportunities in the downtown area, despite a lot of looking around and a lot of sort of possible things to look at, and we did look at quite a few of these sites. The existing library is, the Carnegie Library is right here. One site besides that one that we were looking at was at the corner of Boyd Park, right next to Boyd House. And then the third one is the Albert Park Community Center down here. And then there were other sites that we did look at in some fashion. So these are more complicated, and I'll sort of take a little bit more time to go through these to explain them to you, so any questions might you know, be sort of explained to you. The Carnegie Library is this portion of the building right here. And the idea behind this is that we would preserve and restore the Carnegie, that you would remove the existing library addition that was built in the 60s, along with the parking garage, which makes a very sort of low-ceilinged children's area on the ground floor. Remove that whole wing and then start afresh building within the constraints of the site. The ground floor of the Carnegie could be sort of public meeting rooms and a new entrance, and have a children's area on the ground floor, but with larger floor-to-floor heights, with staff areas as well on this floor. On the second floor, the existing Carnegie could make a brilliant reading room if it was fully restored and cleared out of some of the additions. And then behind that would be the adult and teen and more staff areas. And then the third floor could be all staff area. This creates, kind of a nice sized library, about 27,000 square feet. It is sort of tightly fit into the site constraints, with the streets and the setbacks and the Carnegie. There's not a lot of flexibility here. But that is about as much as we feel we can comfortably fit on the site. The actual construction cost would be somewhere around $34 million. It also then brings up the question of site parking. Right now, again, this site is somewhat underparked, and so adding this much square footage to the library and the increased traffic would put a higher demand on the parking. But one solution might be to deck the sort of eastern end of the Civic Center parking lot. That would add another 40 spaces, which would be a help. And you can get a little sense also then of what the massing might be like. The red areas here are the parts we would remove, and then the addition would sit behind the Carnegie, which would be fully restored. Our idea from a design point of view on the addition would be that it would be something really quite simple and background, and let the Carnegie shine, and let the new building kind of be kind of a quiet addition to it, very sort of glassy and light-filled. And I think it could be really kind of a wonderful solution. The second site that we looked at was Boyd Park. This is, as you're familiar, it's right behind the Civic Center. Boyd House is kind of right here on the corner. The tennis courts are right here. And so what we could fit in here, because it is quite restricted in terms of the setbacks and the grades and everything else, would be about only about 20,000 square feet. You could fit a parking garage on grade on the lower level. Here, you come in right from the street. On the first floor, you could have an entry plaza over here with some meeting rooms and a children's area on the ground floor with adult and teen on the second floor. And it could fit in. It has some sort of deficiencies in terms of it's across the street, and the intersection there is a bit of a tricky one from a traffic and safety point of view. Those things could be overcome, but it is kind of an inherent difficulty of this particular site. And its cost would be around $23 million. The third site is Albert Park. Now, the existing community center is on this site. We sort of came around to this one after looking at other sites and thinking, well, this might be a really interesting win-win opportunity. The existing community center is aging and could use some refreshment. And the library, could also fit on this site if it was rebuilt as a two-story building. The existing community room is kind of the one piece of it that sort of seems to be functioning really well. The idea here would be that we would demolish the rest of the community center and then build roughly within that same footprint, preserving the garden that is very well liked here, and then building rebuilding the community center with about the same number of community meeting rooms and staff areas that currently exist, and then adding on a library with a new lobby entrance here, and the children's area on the ground floor coming up to sort of a large adult and teen area on the second floor. This would require basically rebuilding both the community center at about 17,000 some square feet and the library at about 27,000 square feet, or 26,000 square feet, for about a total of 43,000 and about a $43 million construction budget. There would be parking issues here as well. Part of that could be helped by reconfiguring the existing parking lot, and another option would be to use the large sort of grassy area that is not really any kind of a regulation field. It's kind of a, it's a sort of a playing field that could be done between the Bocce Club and the community center. So those are some solutions that might be possible, and I'll turn it back over to Henry and Susan to.
And thanks for your presentation.
Thank you, Chris. As I mentioned previously, the San Rafael Public Library Foundation commissioned and funded a survey to be done by the OSR group. During that time, they did a survey in May for 2 weeks in English and Spanish and received over 1,000 responses. Tonight we have Josh Labresco, who is the Executive Vice President of OSR Group, who is here to answer any questions and provide you with a brief summary.
Good evening. Thanks very much for having me. Unfortunately for you, Jim Schutz asked me not to show PowerPoint slides, so you have to look at me, but I'll try to be charming. We did just over 1,000 interviews, as Susan said, and we did most of them online, but we also offered people the opportunity to answer on paper if they wished. We did most of them in English, but we also had a Spanish alternative. So there were 4 options for how you'd fill the survey: paper, online, English, Spanish. I should say that Henry and Susan helped with the questions, and we appreciate the Library Foundation funding the survey. We used lists of registered voters in San Rafael, about 11,000 registered voters on the list, and we also had a list of about 1,000 people who had opted in to receive mailings from the library. So with those as our sample base, we got 1,057 responses, which is pretty good. I want to say that we presented, it was just on the downtown. We didn't talk about Pickleweed. We didn't talk about Terra Linda. And we had the 3 alternatives that you heard about from Nolan Tam. We didn't go in quite as much detail as Nolan Tam showed to you. We just showed a map of San Rafael with each location marked. And we gave each location a chance to be analyzed on its own. So you'd look at one location, you'd answer questions about that location. Then you'd go to the next, answer questions about that, the third, answer questions about that, and then finally compare the 3. We did it that way so that we wouldn't bias people in terms of the order. We'd have random order, you'd answer in detail about one, and then you'd get a chance to talk about all 3. So I think it was a pretty good way to construct the survey for you. Now, some of you have seen the full results. There is a link that gives you the report, which is about 80 pages worth of exciting PowerPoint. But I do want to review a couple of the major findings. First of all, in terms of overall preference among the 3 locations, 51% prefer the expansion of the existing location. 24% prefer Albert Park, 13% prefer Boyd Park. This isn't close. This is an overwhelming vote for the expansion of the existing location. And I should say that that was among the respondents as a whole. We also looked at different subgroups. For example, what do just registered voters think? Almost exactly the same percentages. What do registered voters who are also property owners think? Because presumably those people would vote on, would pay property taxes they might need to pay to cover the cost of some of this. Exactly the same percentages. Older people prefer in the same proportions. Younger people prefer in roughly the same proportions, a little less. So whatever subgroups you want to look at, the existing location is the one that the public prefers. Now, we also asked, why do you prefer what are the positives of each location? What are the negatives of each location? So I want to share that with you briefly. For the current location, the main positives are familiarity, first of all. It's the one I know, it's the one I use, I want to keep using it. And then second, preserving the Carnegie Library. I think people don't just want to preserve the building, but want to preserve the opportunity to use the building. If the building were used for public meetings or something else, it's not the same as being able to go there every day and use your library. So those are the positives about the current location. For Albert Park, the overwhelming positive is combining with a community center. We explained that in the survey, and those who liked Albert Park thought that was a great idea. 48% of those who preferred Albert Park said that was the reason. Then next was easy access and less traffic congestion. For those who preferred Boyd Park, and it was a much smaller group who preferred Boyd Park, the fact that it was a modern building, that it was close to the park, had some underground parking, those were positives for that smaller group. Now on the negative side, what did people dislike about the existing location? Primarily concerns about parking. And I think Nolan Tam was quite right to include parking issues in all 3 of the options. That came up repeatedly in the survey, no matter which option we talked about. there also was some concern about the library being closed during construction. If we're going to redo the existing location, you know, we got to think of what we're going to do for a couple of years while that's going on. As to what's disliked about Albert Park, the strong response had to do with the safety of the area. We had comments about drug use, about robberies, car break-ins, homeless people in the area. I don't think this would surprise you, but the strength of the feeling about that surprised us. There were lots and lots of concerns about that. There were also some people who felt that this was inconvenient or too far or not really a downtown location, that Albert Park didn't feel like downtown to some people. For Boyd Park, the major disadvantage had to do with the traffic flow. That's a pretty dangerous little intersection if you think about it, coming around the curve to Mission, and a lot of our respondents recognized that. There was also concern about parking and whether the underground facility would be adequate or whether it would be safe, and there were some comments about Boyd Park having some homeless people and other things that perhaps could be cleaned up as well. And one thing about the negatives that was pretty striking, we asked a question later in the survey, are there any locations that you would not use, talking about the 3 locations? And you know, logically what happens is if you build a wonderful library, you'd think people would want to use it, and they probably would. But the initial impression is important to cope with. We had 66% who said there aren't any locations I would not use. We had 20% who said I would not use a library in Albert Park, which is a lot. We had 15%, or 60, maybe it's 15% who said I would not use a library in Boyd Park, and 3% who I would not use an expansion of the existing location. So what does all this mean? I think a few things. One is that parking is a concern at all of the sites. That's got to be built into the plan, however you deal with that. A second is that the Carnegie Library is a concern no matter what you do. Now, we explained carefully in the survey for the Albert Park option and the Boyd Park option that the Carnegie would be preserved and used in some other ways. But I think the public has concerns about that, and we saw that in all the comments. So how the Carnegie is used, whether we stick with the current location or go to one of the other 2, that's got to be discussed, and it's got to be described if we're trying to get voters to approve. Third thing is that the survey doesn't say we must use the current location, but what it does say is if we're going elsewhere, we need to understand that there are some built-in concerns that people have. We can't just say, let's go to Albert Park because it's a cool place and a community center would be nice. We have to say, we're also going to clean up the area, and here's our specific plan to do that. If we don't say that, I'm skeptical that the voters would approve it. And then the final thing I would say is that in this survey, we did not give people dollar numbers. We felt that would be a pretty complicated thing to add, because after all, the dollar number you're concerned about is not what the total cost of the project is, but how much it affects your property taxes. You know, and that's, maybe we could figure that out in the survey, but it would have been a little complicated. So that's not in there. So I think we need to recognize that if we're going to do the Albert Park option, for example, that's an expensive option, and it might mean more cost to people. And we might have to find out in the survey how people felt about that relative to the other options. So that's a quick summary of the survey. You've got many, many pages of PowerPoint, and I'd be happy to answer any questions now or when the public comes up.
Now would be a good time. Questions? Anyone? John?
So I have a question. I had this question when we had a presentation, I think it was last year or the year before last. The methodology that you used in your survey, in the survey sample, while 1,000 is a significant number, I noticed that 80% of the people surveyed were over the age of 40. And the use of the library, if this happens, is not going to be for another 5, 10, probably 15 years from where we are now.
But isn't that long? But
well, the way the projects go, as we've seen, we just heard a previous one that's going to be 5 years from now, and they're already approved for everything that there is. So those folks that are fully in supportive of this are going to be 50, 60, 70, 80 plus years old. I was disappointed to see that. I'd appreciate you guys not laughing when I'm talking. This is important. I would have thought that we would have looked at the demographic of a future library that's going to be built for something that is going to be around for 40, 50, 60 years, rather than significantly pulling a population that is not going to be using that library in the future. We talked about this before in terms of square footage needed and
Yeah.
what we're seeing from libraries. And we're seeing a projection here based on population growth only that we should have 50,000 square feet of library, when we know from other libraries and other universities and research libraries, they're downsizing the square footage because the usage is not the same as it is now. So I see a lot of these things of the way we're using libraries now compared to what a library is going to look like 10, 15 years from now. You can go to a major university in San Francisco and look at their library, and there's no books on the shelves, you know. So the space they're using is for study space and computers and research, and we're talking about a library that's today where we need 40,000 square feet, and we're projecting out $43 million in today's cost to where that's going to be from now. I just think these numbers are not telling us really what we're going to be expecting 5, 10 years down the road. So.
Well, it's a fair question. I can answer one part of that question, but the other one is I probably can't. The one I can answer is to tell you that because our survey had so many respondents, 1,057 respondents, we did run tabulations by age. So we can look just at people who are up to 39 years old, you know, under 40, and there are 174 of those people, which is enough to get a good sense of how they feel on all these questions. And then we had 286 who were between 40 and 49, and then the rest were, as you say, older. And, you know, if you look at registered voters or registered voters who own property, they tend to be older. That's the way it is. But we do have enough to look at the younger groups in detail. The results aren't terribly different. We did look at that, but it's there, and you can look at it point by point, and I'll be happy to help you with that. As for the broader question of what libraries will be like in the future, you know, the answer to that is probably above my pay grade. I think the Nolan Tam study and the studies that Henry and Susan have been doing speak to that. But I can tell you, I'm on the library board, and I can tell you that all the data we've seen are that libraries have been used, physical usage of libraries continues to go up. Checking out of books continues to go up, in addition to the use of digital resources going up. So you're absolutely right that use of libraries is changing, but some of the traditional uses are continuing as the new uses continue to grow.
Mayor, if it's okay with you, we had just a little bit more on the staff presentation side of it to wrap up. And I know that there's going to be a number of questions after that, but we wanted to finish the staff presentation when you're ready for it.
And then that'd be fine, but I do want to check, since it's fresh in mind with regard to the presentation, because I have a question with regard to the validity of your survey.
Yeah.
No personal reference, but,
That's fine.
you know, it's a scientific, and then there's what do y'all think? And maybe something in between. I'm curious as to how you would characterize your survey. Is it scientific, and if so, what kind of coefficients are we talking about?
Well, here's the general rule. Well, let me give you a simple answer.
Okay.
If you have 1,000 respondents and they're selected at random, you're talking about a response of plus or minus 3% at the maximum.
Help me
As you look
understand,
at
though,
this.
how you solicited the
Yeah, but that's
1,000.
the more important question. So we had, if you don't like the lists from which we selected people, then it doesn't matter what else we did or what questions we asked. But what we did was we had a registered voter list that I think was the most comprehensive list you had available of registered voters who had email addresses. And there were 11,319 of those. Now, there probably are other registered voters, and they didn't get a chance to respond unless they were in the library and could use a paper survey. We also had those 980 people who opted in to receive emails. Most of those are registered voters, some were not. So that's our sample frame, plus whoever happened to be in the library who asked for a survey. We had signs up in various places. Do you want to do the survey in English and Spanish, whatever? See who's at the library today, and we'll help you do that. I'm not sure if that answers your question. In terms of the size of the sample, it's
I'd be
absolutely
interested in,
fine.
not now, 'cause I don't want to get into it in any great detail, but before I fix it in my own mind with regard to the results, I want to make certain that I understand what that population represents and what in fact it's saying, because frankly, I think, and I'm surprised with the response regarding Albert Park, because to me, that's a slam dunk. That makes a lot of sense, and I don't think I'm that much different than quite a few people in our community. So I'm a little bit skeptical, to be perfectly honest, about the results, or at least I'm not yet willing to adopt that as my own principle. So I will be interested in the survey that you took and the quality of the results. So
I will add one thing for you, that in the back of the survey, there's a little bit more discussion of the statistics, the methodology of it. But any survey is only as good as the sample you begin with and the questions that you ask. Now, we talked all those things through, and I can explain to you point by point why we did it the way we
and
did.
I want to get into that now. But if you're sampling, for example, at a location that is the current library, that's going to skew the results.
Absolutely, but
I would
almost
think.
everybody who responded was someone who received an email
And that's
responded
why I want to
online.
make sure I'm dealing with
Like
something that I
98%
can,
of the responses
you know,
came
be
that way.
comfortable with, if you will.
Sure.
Any case, thank you, and we'll take Jim's advice with regard to moving on with the staff report. Thank you for your help on this. Oh, did you have something?
No, I just want to say real quick, just to give a quick thanks to Josh for, well, coming here this evening, but also for the survey work he did. As most of you know, Councilmember Bushy and I served on that committee, and along with city staff and others, provided feedback to Josh as he kind of iterated through the draft survey and the process to make sure that it was as balanced and as rigorous as it could be. So any shortcomings are collective, and they can't all be attributed to the OSR group.
And that's a fair statement, because, you know, certainly you went above and beyond the norms, and I accept that, except if I'm starting to use the data, I need to know a little bit more about the character of that data. So if you would, continue.
Thank you. So we're just going to recap a little bit about the different options that have been presented to you tonight. So these are based on staff's recommendations. So I'm going to ask Henry to go back to a previous slide. On the pickleweed expansion, Nolan Tam had recommended that we add 5,000 square feet, I think it was, and 36 parking spots, and a cost of approximately $7.4 million. I need to also go back. This might make it a little easier. At the time, the library and recreation departments had not yet merged. So everything was looked at through those lenses. So if we can, let me use this little guy. So at the time, the recommendation, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to try to do this without hoarding. So at the time, the expansion of the Pickleweed Library branch was thought of building on top or outside of the building footprint. What staff is recommending, instead of doing that right here, which actually kind of just removes the barbecue area that's being improved in all of the picnic area and encroaches on the playground, our concept, staff is recommending that we do expand the library branch, but within the footprint of the existing building. We might have to add on a little to the footprint, but we think that there's a possibility of basically doing a space planning of the facility and save some additional costs. So instead of coming, instead of going out here, possibly just coming out a little bit where the patio is and coming back into the building and reusing part of the building to save costs. So that's one of the options. Tara Linda, staff completely agrees with the recommendation to look for other cost-effective options within the Northgate Mall to continue to operate that, but to look at options that can increase that footprint up to 11,000 square feet. And then finally, probably the focus of tonight's discussion is really the 3 sites. So staff understands, and the survey supports the fact that there's a lot of passion and community support for the existing Carnegie building. The Carnegie building is a great facility. It has its own impacts as far as would we need to create a displacement plan if that was pursued. The parking is somewhat limited. The other two locations, Boyd Park, you would lose a tennis court. You have underground parking as a potential with a lot of drainage issues, and that site, I think we've discussed that is problematic as far as pedestrian access and safety. And then the last option is Albert Park. And what's interesting, and I think we were just kind of discussing it, is the survey really went out at that point. The entire study was focused on a library. It wasn't focused on a library and a community center. That was not the original question to be solved. So by the time the survey came around, we kind of got to that last point of Albert Park adjoining, because originally the intent was to create a standalone library at Albert Park. And at the very end, the thought came up from the committee of, why don't those two buildings merge? So at that point, that's when the survey went out and asked that question. So it went out under the umbrella of a library survey, but we were asking on that third location, how does the community feel about a library joint use with a community center? Staff is actually recommending that location for a couple of different reasons. The library and recreation departments have merged, and the ability and the collaborations that are there and the innovation and the programs that are possible by joining the two are great. The other option is, or excuse me, but one of the other opportunities there is cost savings. You're building, instead of two standalone buildings, you are using the community space to support library programs as well as the community center programs. So we do think that there's some possibilities. I know that it was proposed that the project, I believe, was estimated at 43 million. 43,000? I'll write a check today. Done, everybody. But at that time, it was 17,000 square feet of a community center and 26,000 square feet of library. But that's if we were to merge the two. There might be some opportunity there to scale it down a little bit and save some additional monies because the use of the community center and the classrooms to help support the library programs. The other recommendations that staff would like to consider is to begin to identify and evaluate funding options that would support all three locations, the downtown library as well as the expansion at Pickleweed and the expansion at the Northgate Mall. And then obviously, if the Carnegie is not selected as the ultimate location, we would want to create a reuse plan for that facility and to retain it. So staff is really seeking the city's council direction on the following recommendations, and we'd like your feedback on a couple of things. Do you support the explore the expansion options within the existing footprint at the Pickleweed Library? For Terra Linda, continue and potentially expand the location at the Northgate Mall, the downtown, create a conceptual design for the Albert Park location, and then with funding, begin to identify and evaluate funding strategies. And we, along with our consultants, are all here tonight to answer any other questions that you may have.
And why don't you go back to the previous slide? That's where you're wanting the input, so, thanks. Perfect.
We're all on this.
Anyone from the, just out of curiosity, not prompting, but anyone wish to address us from the Library Foundation? Yes, sir. Seem to recognize the gentleman that's approaching us. Hey, Gary.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Thank you. I wanted to start out by repeating something that has been said already, and that is that the staff report says that the report is informational. There's no recommendation for formal action. But I want to observe, I've been on the Library Foundation board for probably too many years. I'm now its president. This is the result of years of labor and thousands of pages of work, not only from Group 4, but from Nolan Tam and from OSR, and from all of the people who serve on the board. It's the first time that we've ever had a public discussion about a building of this importance to this wonderful city. So I'm here simply to say that my goal is to continue the discussion and move forward. I'm not here to argue about a particular location, but I am here to again express my profound thanks for letting us arrive here. But I want to notice there's many of our board members here. They all worked very, very hard. Mary Beth and Andrew were with us along the way, and I think that I used to think I would live to see a new library. I no longer think that's true, but the people behind me will, and I think that's good. The library is referred to from time to time as the living room of the community, and the use of this library, when you see the statistics, is phenomenal. That's all I'll say. The statistics demonstrate that fact.
Can I ask you 2 questions?
No. Yes, sir.
Get out of here. I know. First, before a question, thanks to you and certainly all those that are involved in it. It's an ongoing task. It is important to the city, as you pointed out, and you've got some excellent people certainly behind you. Frankly, I've got 2 questions. They are, how's this thing going to be funded? And if it's not funded, and we're talking about a substantial amount of money, 40, 50, whatever the number is, if we can't get it funded, not to get hung up on the dollars and cents, but if we can't, then the pictures and so forth are all nice to talk about, but nothing's going to happen. And then 2, reflecting a question I have, and I don't have an answer, but John raised the question earlier. Feels to me like libraries are going to evolve. Now, I'm not sure how, but I'm not sure that we take our current model and say that we need to replicate it 20 years from now, when it feels to me, but you're the expert, how it's going to evolve, and are we planning accordingly?
I don't know the answer specifically to your question. I think in terms of financing an improvement like this, we first have to have a site.
Right.
We had always envisioned a public-private cooperative attempt to do this, and we're fully capable and desirous of raising funds. We just can't ask anybody to give money when we don't know where it is, or how big it's going to be, or how much it's going to cost. So this process commences, and we go down that road. As far as the use of the library in the future, much has been written about that, and I am not an expert on it, but I would defer to Hank. He's much more adept at this than I am, or some of the others behind me. Certainly, library use has changed, but it's changed from reading books to places people go to search for work, to do research, to do a number of other things. But maybe if you'd ask Hank, he can give you some ideas of how many hundreds of thousands of people, uses occur in our library every year. So there was a book recently written about libraries, and there was a newspaper article in Sunday's New York Times about a small library in Arkansas, where the librarian was going to be paid $25 an hour, and all hell broke loose. But I don't know the answer. I think Councilman Gamble may be correct that people are changing, the uses are changing, but I don't think that necessarily means we ought not to have one.
And I don't mean to suggest that we not have one. I'm just saying that if we're going to plan for this, and particularly the funding, if we're going to plan for it, then it has to be somewhat forward-thinking.
I agree.
A reflection of the past is not necessarily a good mirror for the future.
I agree. I see, if this continues, many public opportunities for individuals to speak with you and experts to come and answer your questions so that you know as much as we do. But if we ever get to the point where we finally arrived at a location, we can then embark on the process of starting to raise money to help you, which has always been our intention.
Well, it's going to require the community, as you well know,
yeah.
in some fashion, probably significant fashion. And so the community has to be in sync with what it is we're seeing.
I agree with you completely.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question. I think it is for Noel and Tam, and it's actually very similar to what the two of you just asked. And in terms of the square footage, talk about library standards, or library industry standards, and we keep saying how libraries are changing the way that they're used. So how do we incorporate that information going forward? And if the buildings are combined, knowing that libraries are meeting places and there's shared spaces between the two, so maybe the 45,000 square feet might be different in that you have a shared space, like that changes the dynamic and changes the equation. And it's, again, getting at what we're already talking about is what does that look like in the future?
Well, we've designed, planned and designed over 50 libraries in the last 20 years, and we've seen them change quite a bit. It's a constantly evolving institution that is responding really well to the needs of their communities. And librarians, I find, are the most creative and energetic people I can think of that really sort of figure out what the community needs and try to provide it, often on a shoestring budget or no budget at all, and in facilities that are really deficient. So I'm always in awe of what librarians can do. So what we've seen is sort of a real transformation of libraries from being this place of books and places to read them quietly, like the Carnegie Library, how they were founded, into much more vibrant and active social and community centers that do a whole bunch of different things. And every community is different. We've designed, say, 50 libraries, and every one is completely different because every community is different, and we have to respond to that. So rather than being places where people come to consume information that's being kind of curated by the librarians, here are our books, and let me tell you what you can read and what's in them, they're becoming places where the community comes to create information and create content and to sort of have much more interactive approach to it. So that requires different kinds of spaces. Rather than just having book stacks and reading areas, we now want community meeting rooms. And so there's a real nexus then with a community center, because part of what you want to do in a library is create places where people in the community can come together and sort of do the things that they want to do, have meetings, have presentations. And so being combined with a community center is kind of a natural affinity. Our Hayward Library that just opened, it brands itself as a community learning center, and it has a vast amount of community meeting spaces that are in the library that are now being partnered with other educational institutions as well as people in the community to sort of fill them up and have a very vibrant and active place. So besides the meeting spaces, it's the living room. It's a place for social activities. It's a great place for teens to come, a safe place for teens to come and be to work there and to do their studying and also entertaining and socializing. It's always been a great place for children, and our children's areas are getting larger and larger and more sort of vibrant because this is, one of the anchors of a community. If you have small children, the library is an institution that everybody relies upon, and you want to provide that. There are places to create things like, create stuff like maker spaces or media, digital media content creation spaces, audio and video recordings that sort of tie into what the young people in the community are needing to do in schools, or older people are using as part of their business. It's a place for people to come together and use the library in all the different ways that they want. So at the bottom, it's, the library becomes the platform where the aspirations of the community are sort of being sort of presented and addressed. And so it's a place where whatever ideas people in the community want to come, they can do it, which means that it has to be really flexible. In terms of size, there's no really such thing as a standard anymore because it sort of depends on what each community is. I mean, people talk about 1 square foot per capita. I mean, that's just really a number. A lot of libraries do just fine at half a square foot per capita. Others are, you can see on that chart, are almost up at 2 square feet per capita. And so it really sort of depends on what you want to do. And then that you add up that square footage, and that gives you kind of what your balance is. I think in rough terms, a square foot per capita is a nice median place to be. But it really depends on what you want to put in it. And you could sort of add in what you want to do. So does that sort of answer the question?
No, it does. I mean, when we look at, going back to the funding question, I think we're all thinking, well, if it costs less, if it was smaller, that might be more attainable. So I think my question was also getting at that, which you did answer. I mean, there is a shared space concept, but at some point, it has to be a certain size to do all the things that you just described. So,
yeah. And I think that's certainly has merit, your question. I have a question with regard, you mentioned earlier you've designed and been involved in the construction of 50 libraries. That's pretty impressive. But I'm curious, knowing San Rafael now that you've been involved in our community, how you see our community funding the library, maybe extracted from other communities, the 50 you've been involved in. I want to get a better sense of the reality of this. What do you see?
As funding mechanisms?
Yes.
Ooh, that's probably above my pay grade a little
But
bit.
you've seen
I've
50 and they
I've
didn't
seen
just
a lot
materialize
of things
out of
happen.
nothing. So
Yeah.
what?
So general obligation bonds have been kind of the mainstay that people, do a bond measure for the library, or sometimes it's combined with other, public safety or some other community sort of infrastructure needs to sort of generate enough community support to support it. A sales tax initiative has been very successful in some of our other cities because it just needs a 50% rather than a full 2/3 majority. The private fundraising can be very valuable in some communities. I think in San Rafael, I think there's some real potential for some private fundraising on the order of, several $million towards this. I don't think, unless you've got some really big donors out there and they're very hardworking, who knows what you might come up with. But I think, the fundraising part requires a very sort of organized, well-financed, and sustained effort to do a proper fundraising effort. So that is one of the things that we always recommend. And Hayward was a good example, which is a large city, but not a city of, high, economic demographics. And they had an incredibly well-organized measure to sort of get a sales tax measure passed. At the same time, they were fundraising and raised several $1 million out of that community, and that really has helped purchase a whole bunch of different things for that project. So it really sort of depends on what works in your community, but we've seen a lot of different things.
So one final question, if you don't mind, and that is based on your experience. A few years ago, I suspect the retail business was going well and not anticipating what we're now seeing with malls closing and retail purchases on the computer more so all the time, almost to the detriment of some of our retailers. And I still have this hang-up with regard to libraries changing significantly. So what could you recommend, maybe later, if not now, that I might read or access that would better inform me as to how we're going to, the evolution of libraries?
Well, Palaces for the People is a book that was written just this last year. And I think it's been getting a lot of really great press. It talks about the library, among other institutions, but the library is kind of a central focus as a social infrastructure. It's a place that really ties community together. And rather than just sort of seeing the library as a sort of an institution to deliver particular services, it becomes a sort of more subtle but more powerful way of tying the community together and providing all kinds of benefits to the community. So a short answer, that would be kind of my one book recommendation, and it's a pretty easy read.
And thanks for that. I mean to get it too far into the weeds, but I'm interested in the topic, and I think it would be a benefit to the community. And I do think that we've been fairly successful in raising money for other things, so we can get over that hurdle. But I do want to, in my own mind, resolve this issue, this conflict as I see it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, but anything you've heard? Okay. Now is the time for you to share with us your thoughts. Anyone from the public?
My name is Leslie Simons. I'm a member of San Rafael Heritage and their steering committee. My family arrived in San Rafael in late 1960 when my mother, Nikki, landed a job at the Cottage Bookshop, finally focusing on her passion for books. By 62, her lifelong dream came true when she was hired by Vivian Smith as a member of the staff at the San Rafael Main Library. After her retirement in 1977, she continued to serve San Rafael in many roles. She was one of the documenters for the San Rafael Architectural Historical Survey of '78. She served on the Cultural Affairs Commission. They created the city's landmark application process, and as president of Marin Heritage, the organization responsible for saving the Park Dollar Mansion, now known as Falkirk. I follow her lead in a passion for preservation for our built environment. Even though Mrs. Smith stated in 1967 the expanded facility was undersized, she treated the 1909 historic structure with respect it deserves, an elegant, airy interior space filled with light and comfort. I do understand the need for greater space, but as stated in the vision report, the community is fiercely passionate about this highly cherished edifice, as a symbol of the community's shared history and heritage. It should serve as part of our Civic Center district. I'm cutting this short. I'm going to say one thing. I think that they need to do both a concept design for Albert Park and the East Street building. We can't, what they're asking is to say, okay, forget everything. I don't mind forgetting Boyd, but I don't want to forget keeping it as part of our Civic Center complex. And I wish you'd also have everyone say what their name is, because that gentleman in the plaid shirt, I have no idea who he is.
And that's certainly something that I should have mentioned. Gary Raganning. He was city attorney for a bunch of years. Oh, okay.
I'll state my name.
But I knew you, Gary. Good evening.
Hello.
Sorry.
I'm Lindsay Klump. I am a resident of San Rafael, and I'm on the steering committee for San Rafael Heritage, our city's only historic preservation group. Currently, I serve as the group's liaison to the Downtown Library, and with the Heritage Library Subcommittee, I'm very focused on the future of the Carnegie Building. The Heritage Group as a whole has voted about 3 years ago in favor of preserving the Carnegie Building, and we have since then been a champion of this historic structure. We've had many demonstrations in front of it, celebrating the building. You may have seen our photos in the IJ to illustrate that. I, for one, am pleased that the library staff recommends preserving this building. Many of us in San Rafael would like to see it remain as a library, but it must, at the least, remain a building with a civic use to serve San Rafael community. Thank you.
Thanks. And I would, just a quick comment, because I've seen your presence elsewhere, and hats off to you. But don't, I'd prefer, I speak for myself now, you not leave the impression with our community that we're thinking of leveling Albert Park, or for that matter, the Whistle Stop building. I mean, sometimes it seems to be promoting your organization, and I think it may leave the wrong impression, because we haven't had those discussions. So I would just ask you to make it clear that we are not, at least at this point in time, to my knowledge, threatening to destroy either of those structures.
That's very
Thank you.
reassuring.
Thank you.
you.
Next person, please.
Hi there, my name's Susan Adler, and I'm here with San Rafael Heritage tonight. I'm really excited to be working with them this year, as of a few months ago, helping them with social media and getting the word out about, you know, our historic resources, and hopefully generating some excitement and interest. So it's a fun challenge. And I'm here tonight also, you know, to talk about the unique location of the Carnegie Library in that sort of historic corridor of Mission Avenue, starting with Boyd Park, you know, going down to all the way to Falkirk, with the Maple Lawn property in between. Although it's privately owned, you know, the Elks do extend that for community events, etc. And it is kind of a unique historic corridor. And I mean, I think it should be preserved. And of course, I'm a proponent of the Carnegie being revitalized. I think it's a terrific opportunity to move forward and honor the past and keep, you know, this really cherished building and beloved library intact. In addition, I love to walk my dog there in the afternoon and the morning, so that's always fun. But, you know, I think that for what I'd like to close with is a few words from Jane Jacobs, where she says that new ideas must use old buildings. And that's it. Thank you.
And thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Lykover. I'm the Vice President of San Rafael Heritage. And I'm very happy to be here tonight with you as you consider the library facilities planning report from our president, Cynthia Landecker, We believe the Carnegie must be preserved and maintained as a city landmark and possibly listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Carnegie must also remain a building with a civic use that is valued as an elegant neighbor to other civic buildings in the area. And to your point, Gary, we celebrate the historic buildings. We are not pointing fingers at anyone who is trying to destroy them. We celebrate them because that's what we do, and there is no other organization in town to do that. Interestingly, I'm not sure if you know this, but in the basement of the current Carnegie Library, there is the California Collection, which is an archive, an historic archive that is not open to the public, but you may access it. We're very interested in this collection, and to that end, we'll be visiting with librarians and looking at it and hoping that it will be preserved within an historic setting. I also echo what Leslie said regarding the downtown, the directions from the staff, that you're only mentioning the Albert Park location, and I find that curious. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Susan Clark, and I have lived in San Rafael for 25 years now and have been a library user at the Carnegie location. And I also have an organization called Common Knowledge, and we do community engagement projects. Some of you may have known of our work with cities. The city of San Rafael has been a client the county of Marin has. But we do work, even more work, around different parts of Northern California. What you may not know is we've done over 20 projects with the California State Library, regional library systems, and local city libraries in the areas of family literacy, adult literacy, and some of your questions about what is the future of libraries. I would say, in addition to the fine book, there's a wonderful conference coming up called Lead the Way. So the forward thinking, how is the library truly the community hub? It's in Madison, Wisconsin in April. Come with me. A couple of my projects are getting featured. But what I want to say is, you may know that I have had a passion about civic and social infrastructure. And so the same way, Nolan, Tim, you are really lucky. I mean, these are the world-class folks, right? And I got to be at the Hayward reception last week, and the state librarian was there. And I've done work in Half Moon Bay, and that library was integral to a project we did that helped bring the community together. So buildings matter, but also how you anticipate to use that building to bring the community together matters. As far as which of these scenarios, I used to be a Parks and Recs commissioner, and I had the opportunity to take on a task of increasing community interest and energy around Falkirk, and really do share the interest in the historic corridor. And I could learn from you, because only recently was I in that Elks building, and boy, does that need help. Anyway, so I see a historic corridor, but I also think about the future users and the future families and the people of all ages. And I don't think we should have to choose between a historic corridor and a really strong revitalized Albert Park area. My daughter went to Parkside. That area of the community feels just as much downtown to me as this does. And I think it would probably feel even more like downtown to the future users and the people that you want to bring in and add to the participation in the library. The staff, the whole thing, they've done extraordinary work. I just wouldn't want anybody to think we're choosing one over the other. I think you can have vital activity in this part of town and do something amazing in Albert Park.
And thank you for your comments. Next, please. Yes, sir.
Good evening. This is good, productive conversation
So I'm
tonight.
not chastised by your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Neil Whitbeck. I live on Laurel Place.
Thank you.
I'm kind of just reiterating a question on this about why the Carnegie facility is not on there in terms of one that the council is looking for direction on. And I know that's been mentioned, and maybe just as a discussion point, some more information on why it wouldn't be on there.
Thank you. Next person. Glad you made it this evening.
My name is Glenna Coleman,
and I have lived in San Rafael for 42 years. Been a very strong part of the community, I think, and I had spent 20 years on the library board of trustees. Kind of gave up on that because we weren't doing anything. So I decided to work with the Friends of the Library when I retired from teaching, and so I do most of my work with them now. I'm on the board. And I was, as you know, over a long time, worked on Measure C, Measure D, any measure we could find. And so I was excited to listen to the Nolan Tam presentation in the spring, and I was looking forward to the results. And on Thursday, we got the word that here are the results, and we could look at it, and it was going to the council and things like that, so I looked at it. The thing that struck me was their results of talking to citizens was a smaller group than the other. One was done in person, one was done online, but the results were essentially the same. And my point is, I don't think you can discount 50% of the people wanting a certain location if you are going to go out for a vote and ask for money. And so I hope you will consider that, because we all know how hard it is to get people to vote money. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Hi, Jamie Cortez, Vice Chair of the Library Board of Trustees. She actually said everything I was going to say. But first I will say thank you to Henry and Susan and Nolan Tam and Josh for doing all this great work. It's been really exciting to see and be at the forefront of it. And as I said before to you all when I interviewed at the library, the reason I love the library is because it is a place of community. This is, when I moved here, this was the place that my daughter and I found a community because we didn't have one here. And so the future of the library to me is what it is currently. It's a community, it's a place for community, it's a place for learning, it's a place for cultural engagement, and they're really, and as people said, a safe space for a lot of people that we don't really have that many in San Rafael. In regards to this report, I wanted to say that and I agree with what she just said, that I think that I was surprised that it was just the Albert Park location, not the Civic Center location, to look at the conceptual design, because as you said, even if you may question a little bit about the methodology of the survey, I think you cannot state that what 51% did say that they were really interested in learning more about the Carnegie location. And I think both of them would be a great starting point. And I just want to know, as you all said, Andrew, that we put a lot of thoughtful time into the questions, into the outreach, into the need to make sure that the community was heard. And I would hate that they weren't heard by not having them as part of the conceptual design of looking at both locations. So that's it. Thank you.
And thank you.
Hello.
Sean.
Hello, I'm Sean Prendeville. I was on the Library Board of Trustees for 13 years, and I'm now president of the Friends of the Library. In the last 10 years, we have donated over $500,000 to the library for library programs. And Nolan Tam report has been going on for over a year, and we received 4-day notice of the staff report. I think we deserve better. But since the city's not going to do that, let me talk about the deficiencies. Basically, I think there are problems with all three suggestions. My major problem is with moving the library out from the Carnegie Building down to the park, Albert Park.
Right.
The library is a cultural institution and has more in common with the downtown art district than it does with Albert Park. You've been studying a downtown precise plan to talk about what the vision is for downtown 20 years out. And at the same time, you're talking about pushing the main branch of the library way to the other end of downtown. That seems pretty self-defeating to me. That's all I'm going to say for now. The other thing is, you're talking about a reuse plan. Well, you've had decades of neglect for the library. You're talking about $1.7 to $2.3 million just to bring the building up to code. What makes you think the public is going to believe that the city is actually going to do something about that building and not just let it fall down? That's my personal perspective, and that's not from the Friends, but we were very surprised to see this option pop up.
Thank you, Chuck. Anybody else? Oh, sure. Yeah, please, come on up.
Jenny Kerrigan, philosopher and intellectual. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on, whether the relevance of I think what this is there's two things going on. Libraries are for intellectual in capacity and excitement and inspiration. Social and recreational things have to do with people interacting about their intellectual or social experience. Libraries are quiet. Libraries have books. Libraries have, the library we have has integrity. And what you're suggesting that only people over 40 enjoy that? No. Any child, any person that walks into a library feels that community spirit of being able to read in peace. And the foundation of why we have these libraries are because of women of privilege at the turn of the century in the 1800s, because they wanted people to read and write. That's why we have public libraries. We will figure out how to pay for it because it's a public library. My goodness, we could ask Mr. Carnegie for probably, I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay, we could ask the Mellon Institute for a grant. Okay, we could have a public bond. I think you should maintain the integrity and the historical relevance and what we all feel for the Carnegie Library. And if you want to connect the two, I don't know what you're planning on doing with City Hall. You could have the library with an ADA bathroom that is only librarians and people that are disabled use, and then you put everything in City Hall. All these buildings, we could have a children's library, we could have a computer lab, we could have a social, you can put it at Albert Park, but you have to understand, one is intellectual and one is social, and it doesn't matter how old you are or where you come from. The foundation of our country is the public domain, and the reason we got this far and we became the country we are is because of the libraries. And the women of privilege stood up for the children to be literate and to learn. And here we are 100 years later debating how we're going to pay for it. We'll figure it out. And if we have to choose between the two, I think that's a shortcoming. I think we should keep both. Or do it differently. Take this building. What are we going to do with this building? Are you guys moving? You guys could move, and we could have the building for all the library services, right? Okay.
We'll take it under advisement.
Okay, God bless. Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Edwina Whitbeck, and I just want to go back to one of the statements of people from the survey about Albert's, the area of Albert's, and that it's not a very safe area, and it isn't. It's sketchy as the devil, and it may be a slam dunk in terms of the spatial part and everything, but the library is open evenings for kids and families and adults, and I just don't think it would be a very good choice.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Lauman, and I am a commissioner on the Park and Recreation Commission. I also live in that sketchy neighborhood of Albert Park area, but that's neither here nor there. What I wanted to know is I was unclear of whether the survey questions asked if the combination of library plus community center rehab was a question on the survey or not, because I think if it was not part of the questioning, then we need to go out and ask the question that is at hand today. My second point is that I really love the Carnegie. I use it all the time with my family. I would love to see that building preserved. I would also love to see the synergies of the modern library, the community's living room that could happen at Albert Park. Part of that is that I believe that the kids that are in middle school, there are 1,200 children that go to Davidson Middle School, and there are hundreds of children that go to Laurel Dell. And there's Parkside right there, and there's the community center right there. And I think the density of the residential neighborhood could really benefit from an increased social facility there. And then the children that have walkable access to that location would really benefit. So I just see not only community services, not only library, but I also see maybe the school district having a beneficial opportunity there, and seniors, especially because Whistle Stop is going to be built not too far from that location too. So I just feel like there's a lot of synergy that's available to be taken advantage of at the Albert location.
And I think that's insightful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Anybody else? Yes? Why don't we do that on the side, because I think we're almost at conclusion, but thank you for offering. Anybody else? Okay, in which case we shall return for wrap-up questions and perhaps input with regard to the staff's request. And I guess I'll turn to the two of you initially.
I'm going to try to keep this brief because my voice is going, but I'm a little concerned about some of the comments we've heard this evening from people whose points of view I very much respect, people who've been involved in the community, the library community in particular, for many years, certainly longer than I have. I want to clarify, if I can, a little bit of where I think the committee was going when it determined that there was greater potential in the fusion of a new library and the community center at Albert Park than had previously been recognized. Stacy Lohman touched on a number of those issues or concerns that helped Albert Park kind of rise a little higher in our estimation. But just by way of background, some of the conceptual work, and I'd love to get a sense from staff as to the cost of the conceptual work being proposed and the cost of, if we were to do both, conceptual work at the Carnegie Building. But some of that work, some of that initial preparatory work for the Carnegie Building had been done in the past. Nothing has been done with the community center. So I'm very interested in what kind of conceptual work that might be done at Albert Park might help us better understand if there's genuine synergy between a new library and the community center. What does that mean to the community as a whole? Another comment I'd like to make, I'm going to harken back about 20 years to San Francisco. No one here is proposing to take the Carnegie Building and demolish it, to the mayor's point earlier, and no one here is looking to eliminate civic uses from the building in the future should the library itself move elsewhere. The voters in San Francisco faced a similar choice more than 20 years ago when they decided to move from the old library to the new main library and repurpose the old main library to the Asian Art Museum. It ended up being a very successful transition. This is my memory of it because I was very tangentially involved. But at the time, you would have thought that the infrastructure of the city was being torn apart based upon the commentary that circulated at the time. So I want people to keep an open mind here. My inclination is I want to learn more about what it means to possibly join the library and the community center in a new building that serves the community more broadly and that can accommodate what may be a fairly rapid evolution of libraries and community centers in the future. One thing that we had the benefit of in working with Nolan Tam is images they showed to us of newer libraries that have been built regionally that attempt to find this sweet spot between meeting space, making space, and reading space that we don't presently see it here in Marin County. And if we can create that is more future-proof at Albert Park, terrific. If we can do it at the Carnegie Building, great. But as we know, there are serious constraints at the Carnegie site that have to be respected. So I'm in favor of the conceptual work that's being proposed by staff, but I also would like to know if we were to do a similar job or even a smaller scale version of it, given the homework we've already done for the Carnegie, what that would mean for us as well.
Good points, and thanks for sharing those. Maribeth? No, I'm sorry, we're done.
I would like to build on the comments from my fellow subcommittee member. I'm wondering if the concept that we need for the Carnegie building is not what it would look like as a library, but what else could be done with it. We are very, I think we've given sort of short shrift to what those options might look like. I'm thinking that maybe if we were to get some other members of the city government employees involved, like for example, economic development, community development, to look for different ideas so that we could present some at least conceptually feasible ideas that the community could understand that there is a future for that building. It might look like this, this, or this, and have a more concrete idea of what that could look like. And then shifting gears to the to looking at the options in Albert Park, one of the most important things about a library is the building itself, I think, and the architecture is something that can impact, you know, the whole city and certainly the entire neighborhood. The potential for doing that in Albert Park is something that, in that whole neighborhood, is just a tremendous opportunity that we can capture. And if we can, in our conceptual plan, have a more specific depiction of it, something that looks fantastic, and we can understand the broader impacts of the building there. I think that will make a big difference. So to sum up, I'm basically in favor of everything that we have there, and I would add on seriously explore options for the revitalized Carnegie building.
And I completely agree. In fact, I was going to offer that, so I'm glad you expanded or added that point, because I think that that's part of the community's concern. Quite frankly, in the survey, I haven't looked at it yet, so I haven't concluded, but it seems to me that many in the community maybe say, well, let's see, if we move the library to Albert, then what's going to happen to this facility? It's been there since 1906 and may be demolished. That's not going to happen, but there may be that concern. So I completely agree with you. I'm glad you brought up that point. End of story for me. Anything for you?
So I agree that the reimagining of what could be the use of the Carnegie building should be included in that. I think from a standpoint of viability of identifying and evaluating funding strategies, when you look at the broader community of San Rafael and what the uses are going to be, that presenting a multi-use community center library in a location that is in a underdeveloped part of town, I think you'll get a broader support than just redoing the library on the existing footprint. So the community center, as we know, that has been used extensively by a number of groups and will continue to be used by that, and that if we could expand on that at the same time as looking at a new library and then taking the Carnegie building back to what it was and repurposing that, possibly as a historical, I'm just throwing it out there, Marine History Museum, library, whatever that could be used for, I think you'd get more community support when it comes to what will be, and people can chuckle and laugh, what will be a very, very expensive project. And with the number of funding requests, I know that you mentioned that Hayward did a sales tax, and you might not be aware, but we're pretty much at the cap of a sales tax in San Rafael and most of Marin County, and so that leaves not many other options other than another property tax, which our property tax bills are getting extremely large, 2 pages to some extent right now. And so if it's more than just one thing, if you're getting a new community center as well as a library, and then, in my opinion, really refining what the library is going to look like when this is going to be built, 10 years from now. I mean, I know you guys think that's going to take, I've just seen the way that it works, what that's going to look like, and maybe it doesn't need to be 27,000 square feet of library space, but it can be more multi-use. So I would agree that we need to look at that at the Albert Park place for a number of reasons, and include maybe not necessarily redoing a library at the Carnegie Building, but other uses of that. I would also say one of the things that's missed in this, and it's been missed a number of times in the past, is that we seem to just want to exclude that there is a library in Terra Linda already, and it's the Marin County Library at the Civic Center that's there. Now, we might say it's not San Rafael's library, so it doesn't matter to us, but people like myself that live in Terra Linda, it's a library. We don't really necessarily care that it says San Rafael or it says Marin County on it. So expanding resources to an area that already has a significant library on it, I don't know if that should be a priority, and I live in that area. So, I mean, I go to the mall's there. If we can get more space at the mall for cheaper and do that, I'm okay with that. But I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time and resources looking at that when there's already an existing library that's available to every San Rafael resident there as well.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment. And maybe when we're looking at the square footage to add in the Marin County Library, even though it's not San Rafael proper, we're looking at us as a community wide. I think that's an excellent point. Just a few comments on pickleweed. Maybe an interim, we look at possibly having a portable or something there, because I do believe there's a need there, and that might be a way to get at it in the interim, because we've talked about the funding, and somehow we need to figure out how to prioritize the funding. We want all the projects. I look at that like, yes, I want all of that. The reality is there's constraints to that. So I think there has to be a hard conversation about what can be funded and how we prioritize it. I concur with what my colleague said. I am interested in the combining of both of those resources, the library and the community center, getting more information. We don't really have enough information. Tonight was the first night that we've all been able to talk about it as a community, and would love to have more. And just in closing, I did a Wikipedia search on Carnegie, and just this little factoids for the Carnegies that are in California, because it is unbelievable that within a decade after being built, it was not the right size. So we're not the only community that had that issue. Too bad he didn't go around and make bigger libraries everywhere. So in California, this is just a little factoid, there were 142 libraries that Carnegie built. Of them, as of today, 59 of those have been demolished, 46 of those have been repurposed, and 37 of those are still libraries. And I bring it up because it shows that we're not the only community grappling with having this incredibly beautiful building that hasn't really translated to 2019. And the figures that are most interesting to me in there is the number of repurposing. People recognize that they're really gorgeous buildings, and how do you keep it going? So anyway, that's your factoids for tonight, and do with it what you may.
And thanks for sharing that. I'm not sure any of us would have guessed that. In any case, Jim, it looks like you have a comment.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just trying to get a little bit more, make sure we're on the right track. It sounds like on this slide that's behind me that we're on the right track there. We want to look at funding. We want to. Can you go to the next one too? So on this slide, what I'm hearing is that you'd like us to go. I'd need to come back to the council to get approval for a contract, an architectural contract.
Right.
And kind of the beginning stages of an architectural contract would be conceptual design leading to schematic design. We wouldn't recommend going to a full schematic design set. That would be way too much.
Right.
So I think what we're talking about doing is some floor plans, building elevations, building sections, how parking might work, couple renderings of the building from the exterior, and then a cost estimate. So I wouldn't mind, I don't know if I want to put Chris Knoll from Knoll and Tam on the spot, but I'm going to say that that's somewhere between $100,000 to $200,000, depending on how far you go into this. It could be on the lower side of that if we just want to do some of it instead of all of it, not develop it very far. But I definitely heard we should go to some limit on the Albert Park site. On the other site, the current Carnegie, I'm not quite clear of whether you'd like us to do that same level of detail and analysis there, or if it would be something smaller. So I just want to make sure we understand that.
My sense is that the answer to that question is no, but rather how we might repurpose it, back to your point. That feels to me, but I'm, we defer to the two of you, but that's
Yeah.
my sense.
Right. I would agree that it's not focusing on a library design there,
Okay.
but coming up with some as concrete as possible concepts that might work for repurposing.
Yeah, but let me just differ slightly, though, because I was saying something a little different than my colleagues. I know that we've done work on the Carnegie Library that, while it's not quite the conceptual design that you are contemplating for Albert Park, it's more than we've done for Albert Park. I'd like to resuscitate or pull that out of the archives, and let's take a look at it so we have something that's a bit of a side-by-side comparison when we continue through this process and we engage more with the community about, well, here's a possible vision for Albert Park, and here's some of the work we had done with the Carnegie Library, so people have something to work on. I don't want to, no one here is making a decision tonight that the Carnegie will never be reused as a new library, but I want to make it very clear that we're continuing to explore our options, so.
And that's different from repurposing, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I
no,
guess I'm missing
I
the
think
point.
repurposing is absolutely a part of it too, if we're going to get serious about Albert Park, but I don't want, the decision is being made tonight.
So you're saying, or suggesting that it might continue in some form as a library?
It might, or we might decide that Albert Park doesn't make sense after this conceptual design for a variety of reasons after looking at funding. We may decide to do a little more work on the Carnegie Building, more than what's the Band-Aid, the 1.7 to 2.3 million, but not the 26 million. So
It's hard for me to imagine, though, that we would build or reconstitute Albert Park to include the library and continue a library here. So if that's
I don't see that
that's the
happening.
direction it seems like we're going, please. No, please. Stop. If that's the direction we're going, then isn't that redundant?
No, let me be clear here. My point is that at some point, we're going to have to make a decision as to which way we're going with a new library. We're not making that decision tonight.
Right.
So until we make the decision, let's gather as much information as we can. Principally, we're looking at Albert Park right now, or we're talking about looking more closely at it because we haven't in the past. In the past, we have looked at, and we've spent some time, I'm going back to Group 4 and previously, on what a remade library at the Carnegie would look like. Some of that work has been done. I'd like to dust it off and take a look at it as we come back to this
I
later.
think that sounds like an easy thing to do and not cost, and if that makes sense to you.
Perfect, thank you.
Why not? It would seem to me. Are you guys okay with that? So with that, are we pretty clear as to where we're going, Jim? We
Yes,
rambled
that's
a little
clear.
bit
So
on Rancho.
we'd be following up on all of these points, looking at funding strategies, creating a reuse plan at the Carnegie. We'd be pulling out the past Group 4 work and other work on the existing location downtown, and then we'll put together a cost estimate or a proposal for you to start doing some kind of early schematic work on the Albert Park site.
And just out of curiosity, you mentioned 100 to 200. I don't know if that's a good number or not. It's a substantial number regardless. Where would that money come from?
We have a couple different possibilities where that money could come from that we'll have to determine for the fiscal impact of that staff report. One of them is that there's currently a Measure C parcel tax capital set aside that's restricted for just new library.
Right.
So that's a possibility. We've also gotten endowments in the past that were restricted for just new
Okay.
library. Both of those would have adequate
I
funds. to
assumed
do
it would
this.
not come out of the general fund. That was really
Right.
my concern. Okay, thanks. Anything else before we accept the report? So would one of the two of you wish to?
Nope, other than to express our excitement that we've reached this milestone. So
Yeah.
with that, I would move that we accept the staff report.
And second.
Moved and second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Item matter carries 5-0. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to the Information Technology Services Agreement. And where's Barbara? And Barbara, while everybody's moving, I just got a note. You and I have been on Facebook friends for 5 years. It just came in. Good evening. Come here. You're out of order. Completely.
You just passed me, tossed the baby around.
Well,
All
seems like you were making a habit of making late-night presentations, but you're always welcome, of course.
Good evening. Yes, always past my bedtime.
Okay.
Ours too. All right. So good evening, good night. Yes. So I'm here to recommend to present a recommendation to shift our staffing model and digital service for our tech and network support from a staff augmentation model to a managed service model. So the short of it is we believe that this is going to result in better support, cost savings, and what I'm most excited about is our ability to shift to being able to provide more strategic leadership to our department. So I'll explain a little bit about that. But before I get into that, I want to extend my gratitude to Gus Bush. He's been the project manager for the last several months on this important project. And so thank you for that. Thank you to Adrienne Dale, who is here in the audience. She's a consultant that has also been helping us with this procurement. Also, not here tonight, but helped us a great deal is Lisa Goldfein from the City Attorney's Office, as well as Christina Lilovich, helping with support of this project as well, and with the negotiating of the agreement. Also, major thank yous, because it was hours and hours of work. Chief Bishop, Thomas Wong from Public Works, Catherine Kufa from Library and Recreation, and David Catalanato from the Fire Department, as well as the digital team for serving on the evaluation team for all of the vendors that we did look at. And lastly, I want to note that we have representatives here from the recommended vendor, Xantrion. They're also here tonight. So for the past several years, we've used a staff augmentation model in the former IT division, which basically means augmenting city employees with part-time contractors to perform network and tech support. This model has had some inherent structural challenges to it. They're outlined in the staff report in more detail, but we aren't typically able to provide service past 5 o'clock, so yet some of our departments are 24/7. We've had limited skill sets, specialized skill sets, by having to staff these positions in-house. The burden of performance management and coordination has been on the city, and so this has really limited our ability to provide proactive strategic supports to departments in this way. So again, I think several of our staff in our department are spending the majority of their time doing day-to-day operational work rather than that strategic work that we would like to be doing with departments. So our recommendation is to consolidate our multiple support agreements with a single vendor, and this approach will cost less and provide greater value to the city. I think that the staff report outlines numerous benefits to this approach, but to me the really critical one is that we provide 24/7 technical support to our police and fire, public safety. They use technology more than ever inside their vehicles, wearing technology, and it's critical that they have support when they need it. What's not quite shown in the numbers is, again, the value that's unlocked by freeing up our staff to think more strategically and work more strategically with our departments. Currently, several of our employees are consumed by the work of day-to-day tech support, and I'd like to free them up to work more strategically on long-term issues around the city's use of technology. Our current model, it's just proven at this point to be unsustainable and not in alignment with our new department's goals and mission. By moving to a managed service provider, we believe that departments will get better support at the end of the day, that will be positioned to save more money later on down the road, as this vendor is able to help us with better asset and user management. And again, we'll be able to provide that strategic leadership on how the city should be best using technology rather than fighting day-to-day fires. So in May, we issued an RFP. We received strong vendor interest. We had 8 vendors that submitted proposals. We narrowed it down to 4 for demos, and then we attended site visits for the top 2 finalists. Both finalists were very strong, but the general consensus among the evaluation team was that the proposed vendor is the right fit for the city. The recommended vendor, Xantrion, was selected due to their ability to provide true 24/7 support to our police and fire, their deep expertise in both security as well as network administration and design, and what I think was most impressive and how they really stood out from the rest is their strong commitment to customer satisfaction. So we're incredibly excited to work for them. The agreement before you tonight is with Xantrion to provide comprehensive tech support, network administration, security, and strategic advisory services. It's for a contract term of 1 year at the rate of about $82,000 a month or $977,000. We're also recommending a $10,000 contingency. And for comparison, for the last 2 years, we spent on average about $1.1 million for similar services, but for lower service levels than what this agreement represents. So our goal over time is that as we identify further cost savings, that we want to look at enhancing our security, as well as taking advantage of Xantrion's secure cloud hosting services. So those are things later on down the road that we hope to be able to identify savings to direct in those 2 areas. And should you approve the agreement tonight, we are on track to be able to transition to the new service provider by November 1st. So keeping it short and sweet, we're happy to answer any questions. Gus is here, Adrian is also here. And then real quick, if you don't mind, I'd like to invite Ann up to say a few words.
No, thanks for being here this evening. And you could use this one, I think, might be better. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I'm Ann, president of Xantrion. We're really excited about potentially partnering with you. And in particular, we're excited about jumping in behind your first responders, your police, and your fire. It's a great match for who we are and how we do business, and we really think that we can help you guys use technology to make their jobs easier and make them more effective. So we appreciate the opportunity.
And one question, if you don't mind, and I'm a little bit reluctant to ask, but since you're here, I will. You have not worked with municipalities, and police and fire, maybe a different animal in that regard. You're comfortable that you're going to be able to serve at least the 2 of them departments?
So far, we've had a great team of people to work with inside and outside your organization. We have learned a ton in just the last 2 months of trying to kind of figure out the contract, et cetera. So I feel really great about the people on your side of the fence helping us kind of navigate what's new about working with government and municipalities. What I'm not worried about is jumping in behind your first responders. We pride ourselves on being an organization who has the same kind of response times that your first responders are held to. We do that for all of our clients, whether they're first responders or not. So that's kind of the least of my worries in terms of learning how to work with y'all. And that's why we're the most excited to kind of jump in behind them. I think we're really well suited to help them out. And I feel really comfortable, given what we learned about Rebecca and Gus and the other folks in your organization, to help us navigate more of kind of the administrative aspect that maybe we're not as familiar with in terms of working with y'all.
Thank you for that, and welcome.
Sure. Thank you.
Other questions?
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you, Rebecca, for the report. And I know that we've heard this in Finance Committee as well as having individual conversations with you. I really appreciate that. The only comment that I'll make, and I've made it to you and to others, is it's not as much of a concern because of the way that you expressed it to me, but the sensitivity of the information that is going to be put out to a third-party vendor in today's world of hacks and data loss, and that's a concern of mine. And you've addressed it in the extent that you say that it's better and stronger than what we currently have, which is good. But when we turn that information over to a third party outside of our control, I just want to make sure that the expectation is very clear that should the unthinkable happen, that we're not finding out about this in the press or 4 or 5 days or weeks afterwards, saying, oh, we thought we had it under control, we were taking care of it internally. That it needs to be absolutely clear that any information or data breach is reported back to us immediately. So that's just my
Good
comment.
point, John,
Yeah.
thanks. Okay,
So I just have a question and a comment. So are there also transition costs that go with how it is to where it will go?
Yes, and those are underway. It's a separate agreement, and it's actually within Jim's signing authority. So it's a separate agreement that we're looking at, and they're one-time costs, and they'll be over the course of October. So we're looking at a cost of a little over $70,000 for that.
Okay, great, thank you. And I echo what John just said. That was the other thing I wrote, was the security of system. You went at it a little bit differently, but that is something that's so important. Boy, we look at the newspaper every single day, and cities' data is being taken hostage. And so, to me, having your expertise on that and having one vendor actually, to me, makes the whole thing that much safer, because you don't have as many people having access to it. So, anyway, so I wanted to echo that, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
yeah, we don't need ransomware, right?
Your question?
Please.
Are we do we have a plan to release or terminate the services of some of our contracted staff as we cut over to Xantrion?
Yes, all of the other agreements that are in place actually expire October 31st. So hence our tight timeline. We're trying to make that, and so those, as we anticipated this transition and what that timeline would look like, the last agreements that you all approved were to the contract term of October 31st in anticipation of a new vendor coming on board November 1st.
Will we have some period of crossover so that the new folks can learn from the old folks?
That's happening right now.
Great. And then, I'm looking at the contract, or I looked at the contract, and it's a little unusual in a number of respects, but what possibly concerns me is that there's either side can terminate at convenience. If for whatever reason things aren't working out, then 90 days notice, either side walks. That works in a number of arrangements, but when you've got a mission-critical service like IT and tech support, it may be hard to backfill if for whatever reason Xantrion or we decide that it's a relationship that's not entirely positive. Do we have a contingency plan for that, or are we so confident that we vetted this on both sides that we think it's unlikely in the near future that we would have to invoke that provision in the contract?
Yeah, we actually did talk about that, and we extended it. I think the original agreement was 30 days, and we extended it to 90 days to give us more time in that case. But we're also very confident that is not likely to occur, and that we'd be looking at, right now we're looking at a 1-year term. I think a year from now, we'll hopefully be looking at a longer term.
The thing about a 1-year term is you don't get any price protection. Did you discuss that at all to ensure that if it is successful, that Xantrion doesn't price their services above what we thought was a cost-effective arrangement?
That was also discussed, and we went back and forth whether we wanted to do a 3-year term, a 2-year term, a 1-year term, and especially with the conversations around price raising. One of the things that we want to do, why we want to do a year from now, is because the pricing model is typically, we went back and forth whether it should be per user or based on the number of devices. And we think that after working with them for a year, we're going to streamline a lot. And so we wanted to revisit that in a year from now and see what pricing model makes sense a year from now going forward, because it might not be the same model that makes sense today.
Great, so I'm going to expect pricing is going to come down on a monthly basis a year from now. That's terrific. I'm glad that you're reporting that.
Let the record reflect, right? Maribeth?
Nope, I'm ready with the motion when you want one.
Only shortly after complimenting you and everybody involved in bringing this, ACES, really good job, really good job. Thank you. Now would be a good time.
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Anybody public? No, okay, go ahead.
I now move that we adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a general services agreement with addendum with Xantrion Incorporated.
Second.
Move and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Cullen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. Thank you for joining us this evening. Sorry we went on a little late, but sometimes that happens. We'll move on to council members' reports.
Very quickly, we had
Quickly.
MCCMC Homeless Committee met, which is, there's a representative from all the jurisdictions, and one of the items that we talked about was the point-in-time count. So look, I brought handouts for you. This really basically summarizes the data from January, and the county did a really great job. I have extras for you, Jim, and there you go. And then the other thing I wanted to report out, Marin Transit met this morning, and right now we're taking comments on the short-range transit plan, which you can go online and provide comments to the board.
Okay, very good, thanks. Anything else, I think everybody knows that SMART has agreed to close Jacoby, so we're not strapped with horn blowing for 6 months or whatever it was. So thanks for Jim's involvement in that. In any case, no successor agency, therefore we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.